Well, hello everyone. We've got a hell of a stream today, and hopefully the video and sound is excellent. I'm monitoring the headphones. We're improving all the time. As you can see, the video keeps improving, the audio keeps improving. Nature is healing as Jason improves his technical skills. So, of course, none of this is free, and I wanted to talk real quick about the channel and its growth before we get started with the worst, by far, Agori hour ever. For those of you who don't know, Agori hour is when, during the week, and not the weekends, during the week, I expose some of the most unsavory aspects of the occult. Not conspiracy theory stuff, not stuff that people make up, but the real stuff. And the reason I do that is because people make up enough stuff about us as it is. It's important to call out the real issues so that the community is policed, so that, for instance, crazy ass religious fundamentalists don't find fodder to go after us for. And more importantly, so that these techniques of spirituality, meditation, are free from this long dark shadow so that more people can benefit from them. Awesome. Okay, so as you may have gathered, a lot of my videos get demonetized because I talk about pretty rough things from time to time, and YouTube doesn't like that and it demonetizes it. That's fine. I don't begrudge that at all. They have sponsors and advertisers they need to keep happy, but it means that there's a couple other things which are really, really important for this channel. One is super chats. I'm really, really grateful to people who throw in super chats. It's actually like some good money. You know, I'm dropping probably tens of thousands of dollars on gear to make these videos look good, and I just dropped a bunch more for the audio, which hopefully sounds good. So all of that costs money, and yes, of course, I do mention my courses at magic.me on these videos. So please check those out. You can see them at magic.me. where we have courses on everything from chaos magic to hermeticism to astral travel and everything in between. This is magic.me is where I teach magic safely, free of all this horror show stuff. And this has been my job for the last 30 years, and formally at magic.me teaching for the last 10 years. And prior to that, most of my life was spent gallivanting around the world, getting into terrible situations like the one we're about to talk about, so that I could determine what was not safe for most people and teach magic safely. So we have a new course starting on Monday. If you're watching this, we always have new courses starting now, particularly as I get going with video. There's going to be lots more. So go to magic.me. Adept Initiative 2 is starting on Monday, or if you're seeing this later, you can go check it out. So there's that. And super chats, awesome. I just set a new super chat goal. I've sent 10 super chats. With 10 super chats of $5 or more in this stream, which is going to be long, by the way, so strap in, I will create a video on the top occult movies of all time. That will be a fun and lighthearted video, although I will, of course, have choice words from the movies Hereditary and The Witch, which I do not like. But that'll be a much more lighthearted video. So 10 super chats. And also, excitingly, you can't do it yet, but excitingly, we now have memberships. YouTube is currently has them under review, but there's going to be membership tiers for people who want to support the channel, and that'll be a phenomenal way to help us continue doing this. And yes, so Brandon, no more Spotify. I'm trying to juggle doing a podcast and a YouTube at the same time and teach courses. So there will be more podcasts, don't worry. But I am but one man, and of course all of your help really helps, because it would be great to get some people helping, and that requires money. So check it out. So take courses at magic.me. Thank you, Brandon. Super chat, interesting logo. And yes, we're going to continue to paint Vodon in a bad light in this video, so hopefully you're all prepared for that. So let's get straight to it. I have been very critical of Vodon for almost 30 years now, and the reason is because it is connected to a lot of very, very bad things like human trafficking networks. I have been a lone voice, and I mean lone, outside of a few Nigerian and African investigative journalists and a few NGOs working in Africa, some of whom I've linked below. So if this video disturbs you, which it will, I've also linked NGOs and, anti-human trafficking organizations that you can donate to in the comments. Polaris is the one that I always go with. They are vetted, 5 stars. They help with human trafficking all over the world, which is a worse problem than ever. And the real dark, just to spell it out up front, the really dark thing about this is that slavery never went anywhere. Slavery is still here in many different guises. It's here in the Middle East under Islam. It's here, it's still in Africa. It's still in Europe. There are sex trafficking networks all over the world. We still live in a world where slavery exists. And you cannot, in my opinion, thank you, Ron. Yes, support what you can. And if you can't, that's okay. But if you can support the channel and help out the people who can't, super, super valuable. Because obviously I'm trying to make this my job here. The courses are my job, but we can make these better and better and better and better as time goes on and reach more and more people. And also, of course, like and subscribe, everyone, please. Even if you can't donate, please please subscribe. At the very least, send the videos to somebody, share them online. That really helps a lot. Particularly because, as I've found out, YouTube does not like occult videos or esoteric videos. It doesn't like the word witchcraft even, and so I suspect they limit the reach of some of these videos. That's not going to stop me talking about it. It just means that we as a community need to figure out other ways to get around some of that. And of course, I don't begrudge YouTube any of that, because they're a family-friendly platform. So thank you, Ron. I really appreciate it. So I have been trying to explain to people the horrors of Vodon, and I learned them firsthand by joining the religion. And I got just the tip, as they say, but the reality is far, 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 far worse. I'm not going to go into my own personal history with it, because honestly, it's a long time ago now. Of course, every time I do this, assholes come out of the woodwork to try and call me a racist, or cancel me, or do all this nonsensical stuff, which has nothing to do with the actual problem. The actual problem is the perpetual slavery of African children. And if you want to cover for that, if enslaving African children is the hill that you want to die on, go right ahead is all I can say, and we'll all see you as a community. So I've talked about this on posts. I have everything, and by the way, I'm going to read, and everything that I'm going to talk about today, I have put up online. So even if you don't listen to all of this, go check it out, endvoodootrafficking.org. Endvoodootrafficking.org. It looks like this. Oops. Okay, so this is, I created this. This is online, and we're going to be going through this, but every single article that I reference is linked here. Nothing is made up. All that we're going to talk about is actual cited sources. And when I say cited, I mean from the US State Department, from the United Nations, from the BBC, from anti-trafficking NGOs. It goes on, from Europol. Nothing, I'm not going to read you anything from occult, but until we get to the very end and we talk about the actual occult community. I'm not going to give you any hearsay, no conspiracy stuff. Nothing but vetted sources. But you can find it all, and you can all research it for yourself if you want to go look at endvoodootrafficking.org. So, or you can pull it up and follow along if you want. Okay. So, let's define what the purpose of this stream is. The purpose of the stream is to call attention to a problem. When I've posted about it online, people haven't listened and they've attacked me as usual. When I put this up, a huge page, what did they do? They attacked me again. Some of the old people that did, and some new idiots who just want to join in and impress their friends or something like that, joined in the hate Jason party. Okay, well, whatever. You can hate me all you want. You can say whatever you want about me. You cannot argue with the UN, Interpol, the BBC, the US State Department, anti-trafficking NGOs, Nigerian investigative journalists, African sources. And by the way, I've taken pains to not just cite Western sources in here, because I'm well aware that the critique can be, well, all of these Western organizations are neo-colonialist, even NGOs potentially are neo-colonialist, and they're justifying, for instance, things like the Clintons did in Haiti, perhaps. But that does not apply to African sources, of which I have tons here. I've got tons of sources of journalists from the west of Africa where most of this happens, like Ghana, Benin, Lagos, and Nigeria, and many other places. All right, so this is all vetted, and you can all see that for yourself. So since most people don't read, I'm doing a video about it, and god damn it, you people are going to listen to me this time. And again, seriously, you're going to fucking listen to me this time. And if enslaving African children is the hill you want to die on, go right ahead and do that in public. And we'll leave it at that. Okay, that's enough about my background. Okay, and by the way, I have behind me, this is the forest in Benin, originally known as the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is the originating place of voodoo. So the final point, Vodon is a complex topic, and we're going to get into that. Am I saying that all voodoo that 100% of voodoo is evil? No, I'm definitely not. In fact, I'll show you, there's in some of the videos here, you'll see that there are voodoo people working against some of this stuff in Africa. What I am against is white, mostly white, basically almost all white, British and American voodoo practitioners who are into it for occult edgelord points, who want to call me racist for pointing out the obvious, my new favorite phrase, obvious problems in this religion. You cannot dismiss them. You cannot claim, and again, like every time I point this out, these rich white Westerners claim that I'm somehow being racist to them because they want to be voodoo LARPers. No. Okay. So let's get right into it. Of course, we got our first super chat. With 10 super chats, I will make a much more lighthearted video, which is about the top occult movies. And we will have our membership soon. All right, let's just kick it off right now. Here we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be looking up because I have two monitors here, so bear with me. All right, so this first part is my writing and gives you the overview. Can we shrink it like this so I can look directly at it? Let's try that. All right, you can probably see that better anyways. All right. Here we go. Voodoo's itty-bitty human trafficking problem. So again, you can see this at endvoodootrafficking.org. Okay. This survey highlights many of the, of course, you can listen to this as a podcast. You can go about doing your dishes or your work or continuing to work at your job and just listen to me in the background. This survey highlights many of the serious issues associated with voodoo, sometimes known as Vodon or voodoo, or Vodou, however they pronounce it. I believe it's just voodoo or voodoo. Originating among the Yoruba people of West Africa, primarily in Nigeria and Benin, voodoo is a complex set of religio-magical beliefs with historical and ongoing ties to the slave trade. These beliefs were brought to the New World by enslaved West Africans during the era of European slave trading. Today, voodoo is practiced worldwide, transcending racial and national boundaries, partly due to its adaptation for the New Age marketplace. And I want to make that clear, too. People playing the race card on this are ridiculous because just like Islam, which I pointed out, is unbelievably multicultural, at this point, so is Vodon, as it is now practiced across the world. It's not a race, it's an idea. So people love, again, white people love to say like, well, you just hate black people if you're putting this. It has nothing to do with anything. In fact, I'm the only person trying to call attention to some of the plight of some of the people in Africa. All right, okay. Not because I want to be like some kind of white savior figure, but just because people forced this to be my issue, because when I pointed it out, they decided to slander me. So here we are, kids. You just made me, you made me just continue hammering this forever, as I will continue to. You dug your own grave, now you can lie in it and not come back as a zombie. That's a terrible joke. Anyways, voodoo entered the New World via the transatlantic slave routes, primarily through Haitian slave ports and subsequently into the United States, notably through ports in Louisiana. Yoruban beliefs were often masked with Catholicism to hide these practices from slave owners, resulting in the syncretic religions of Haitian voodoo and New Orleans voodoo, among others. Legalized slavery remains a profound stain on the conscience of Western powers, who now strive to redefine themselves in light of their past actions. However, slavery has always been a global issue and continues today under the guise of human trafficking. Nigeria, Benin, and Haiti remain major hubs for the trafficking of human beings, with New Orleans historically being a significant intake center for slaves in the United States. That still is human trafficking, from Asia too. This site surveys literature connecting voodoo to modern-day human trafficking, murder, child sacrifice, and other crimes. This gets dark, so I hope you have a strong stomach. And here, this is critical. The thesis of this survey is that in many instances, voodoo, rather than being a force for liberation, as some portray it, is a central component of ongoing global slavery. It is used by traffickers to psychologically control their victims, primarily women and children. These modern-day slaves, trafficked from West Africa to Europe and beyond, bring voodoo beliefs with them, not as sources of strength, but as tools of fear that silence them and prevent them from seeking help. For the last several decades, primarily white Western academics, and yes, I'm going to go there, primarily white Western academics and lay religious practitioners with limited experience of voodoo outside of books or neo-pagan adaptations have framed voodoo as a religion of anti-colonial resistance, citing its role in the 1791 Haitian Revolution led by Toussaint Louverture. Interesting last name there. Toussaint, I believe it's Toussaint Louverture. I got a 1 on AP French. This perspective may serve to ease their guilt over colonialism, enhance their anti-imperialist credentials, or obscure their own problematic appropriation of the tradition. This framing also allows them to dismiss criticisms of voodoo as the rhetoric of Western imperialism, despite voodoo's broader West African roots beyond Haiti. When individuals dismiss reports of harm caused by voodoo as neo-colonialist or racist, they are mischaracterizing a belief system as a racial identity. Yeah, same thing they do with Islam. It's totally false. It's a total lie, misdirection, and scumbag technique. Voodoo is practiced by people of various racial backgrounds globally. By labeling criticism as racism, they foster a culture of silence and fear. This suppression of dialogue mirrors the coercive tactics used by traffickers to silence their victims, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation. Indeed, many involved in voodoo-based trafficking, particularly as customers, this is really dark, but it's real, and it's backed up, and I'll show you. This is very dark. Many involved in voodoo-based trafficking, particularly as customers, are European or British PDF files, Chesters. Studying the well-documented use of voodoo by modern traffickers may offer insights into how such beliefs were likely used during the transatlantic slave trade and even prior. No religion is free from abusive undercurrents, that's for sure. Examples include PDF-philia within Catholicism and the Hare Krishnas, extremist violence and female... I don't know what to say on YouTube. Baby mutilation in Islam, nationalist violence and sati or widow burning within Hinduism, or even the ongoing genocide of the Muslim Rohingya people by Buddhists in Myanmar. Nor are abuse and human trafficking confined to religious groups or networks alone. While this survey focuses on voodoo, it does not suggest that voodoo uniquely perpetuates abuse or human trafficking. However, the scale of abuse and the almost total lack of awareness about voodoo-based trafficking networks in Western media, I mean zero, coupled with and if it was covered, I've captured it here. We're talking about articles from long ago. However, the scale of abuse and the almost total lack of awareness about voodoo-based trafficking networks in Western media, coupled with the complete absence of transparency or efforts to address these networks by voodoo practitioners outside of Africa. There are some addressing it inside Africa, but as far as I can tell, that's it. There's none in the Western Hemisphere, as far as I can tell. Despite the bleeding leftism of many of the white people who claim to practice voodoo, nothing. No interest whatsoever. So some leftists they are. Coupled with a complete absence of transparency or efforts to address these networks by voodoo practitioners outside of Africa, necessitates a strong call for awareness to the global community. In recent years, cultural discourse around race and racism has significantly shifted, with racism now being primarily defined as a structural problem, with a particular focus on how the historical structures of slavery and segregation have remained in place, albeit more hidden, in Western societies. Examples include the disproportionate policing and incarceration of black men and women in America, or the practice of redlining to uphold segregation by barring black families from home loans in predominantly white areas. In this light, voodoo-based trafficking can be seen as representing structural race. Voodoo-based trafficking can be seen as representing structural racism par excellence. Beyond echoing and upholding the historical legacy of slavery, the global organized structures of voodoo-based trafficking represent the ongoing continuation of the slave trade itself. I'm going to read that again. And yes, I know how stern and I know how heavy that sounds. The global organized structures of voodoo-based trafficking represent the ongoing continuation of the slave trade itself. Don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. I didn't make any of this up. We'll see how many people get ass blasted about this one. This survey makes no claims that voodoo actually represents any supernatural phenomena. Indeed, it is in the light of victims' fear of supernatural control implanted by psychological suggestion or outright intimidation that voodoo can more appropriately be seen as a system of bluffs and psychological control mechanisms in which claims of supernatural power are often used to terrorize victims of trafficking into silence. Such threats of supernatural retaliation are not unique to voodoo and are a common staple of coercive cult structures. Voodoo is only one of numerous syncretic Afro-Caribbean or traditional African religions. For instance, Santeria, Ifa, Candomblé, and many others. Africa comprises 1/5 of the world's land surface, with a massive range of religious practices, ethnic groups, and wisdom traditions that Western academics have been woefully uneducated on. This survey is constrained to voodoo. However, I have also included some information about adjacent traditions that overlap the pattern of trafficking and violence seen in voodoo, particularly in the Americas. For instance, the notorious Cuban-American serial killer Adolfo Constanzo, who was trained in voodoo in Haiti before augmenting it with Palo Mayombe practices taught to him by a Haitian Polero in Miami. Only vetted and authoritative sources have been used in this survey, with a preference for information from academia, mainstream journalism, no conspiracy blogs, mainstream journalism, governments, and law enforcement, or voodoo practitioners' own writing. Wherever possible, I have included not just American or European sources, but documentation and reporting from African academics and investigative journalists. Please note, and I'm completely serious about this, please note that the crimes described in this survey are exceptionally severe, and may be re-traumatizing for survivors of abuse. I strongly advise exercising caution and considering your mental well-being before engaging with the sources cited below. And by the way, this is not some trigger warning, safe space thing. No, this is really bad. This is really bad. And if you do have a tendency towards re-traumatization by information, for instance, because of abuse in your own background, go easy. Go easy. This is a real human being warning, not some silliness. All right, so here's our table of contents, and we're going to go through all of these. Just to give you a preview, each one of these has lots of sources. Voodoo trafficking and child murder in the UK. Voodoo trafficking and slavery in the European Union. Voodoo trafficking and child abuse in Benin, Nigeria, Togo, the Ivory Coast, and elsewhere in Africa. Voodoo as a tool of political and biochemical terror in Haiti. That one's intense. Voodoo and voodoo adjacent cartel violence, murder, torture, and serial killing. Oh yes. And then voodoo ritual abuse and neo-Nazism, believe it or not, in the occult community. Briefly about me, for if this is your first video watching or you don't know about me, my name is Jason Louv. I'm an American author specializing in contemporary and historical religio-magical practices with a focus on their intersection with geopolitics. My work has appeared in Vice News, Vice Motherboard, Boing Boing, and other publications. I am available to provide information or quotes to media, law enforcement, governmental, or non-governmental organizations. I can be contacted here. So by the way, thank you. I saw another super chat. Thomas says, I make documentaries. How do I contact you? You can contact me through this page right here. I can be contacted here. There you go. Thank you for the super chat. All right. So here's how we're going to do this. So as you can see, what I've done here is I put links to sources. This is not in my words. This is vetted words. And then what I've done is I've summarized the key points so that you don't have to read the whole article. So the way I'm going to do this is let's see, how do I do this? So I'm going to pull up the article so you can see it. So you can see I'm not making it up or something like that. And then, but I'm just going to read my summary. If you want to, let's see. Okay, actually, this is how we're going to do it. If you want to know more, I've linked the entire article on the page, so you can go check it out. You can go check it out yourself. So lots of info to follow up on. Don't take my word for it. You can read the article. All right, so let's start here. So we're on section 1, voodoo trafficking and child murder in the United Kingdom. All right, so again, I'm going to show you the article that I'm reading, but then I'm going to read my summary. Okay. All right. U.S. Department of State 2023 Trafficking in Persons Report has this to say. Human trafficking is a crime that affects millions of people worldwide. Let's get this shrunk down. Whoop. All right. So I'll just put this up so you see what I'm reading from. Traffickers use various methods to control their victims, including physical violence, psychological manipulation, and the threat of voodoo rituals. In some cases, traffickers from Nigeria and other West African countries use voodoo rituals to exert control over their victims. These rituals involve threats of death or serious harm if the victims do not comply with the traffickers' demands. This psychological manipulation is particularly effective in controlling victims and preventing them from seeking help from authorities. European traffickers have adopted these voodoo practices to control their Nigerian victims, recognizing their effectiveness. So this is why it's particularly rich when white so-called voodoo practitioners come at me saying I'm racist. Let me read that again. European, i.e. white traffickers, have adopted these voodoo practices to control their Nigerian victims, recognizing their effectiveness. The rituals create a climate of fear that ensures the victim's compliance and silence, making it difficult for law enforcement to intervene and provide assistance. In the UK, several cases have been reported where Nigerian women were trafficked and forced into prostitution through the use of voodoo rituals. The traffickers, often European nationals, use these rituals to instill fear and ensure the victim's obedience. These women were often isolated and threatened with severe consequences if they attempted to escape or seek help. So again, everything I read here is not in my words. It's from what I'm reading. And I will tell you if something's in my words. But if I don't tell you something is in my words, just assume it's not. It's from vetted authorities, which is like 95% of the stuff I'm going to read is just quoted from vetted sources. All right. BBC News. Boys used for human sacrifice. I guess this is originally from the Agence France Presse. Okay, here we go. Children are being trafficked into the UK from Africa and used for human sacrifices. Yes, human sacrifices. It's not some QAnon insanity, and I actually really hate QAnon because they draw attention away from what's really going on. Children are being trafficked into the UK from Africa and used for human sacrifices, a confidential report for the Metropolitan Police suggests. Police face a wall of silence in investigations because of fear and mistrust among the groups involved. Contributors said boys were being trafficked into the UK for this purpose, but did not give details because they said they feared they would be, quote, dead meat if they told any more. There were also claims that youngsters were being smuggled into the UK as domestic slaves and for men with HIV, this is real, who believed if they had sex with a child, they would be cleansed. The report called for the Social Services Department to determine how many faith organizations exist and where they are situated. The recommendations in the report are being carefully considered at the highest levels in the MPS, Metropolitan Police, in conjunction with partner agencies and community groups. All right, I'm going to check in on the chat after each section here. So once we get through the UK. All right, next. Oh, we did that one. Okay. Oh, okay, actually, I apologize. The one I just read was this one from the BBC, Boys Used for Human Sacrifice. Yep, real bad. For spells to be powerful, it is required a sacrifice of a male. It is required a sacrifice of a male child unblemished by circumcision. That is from a police report in the UK. All right, so that was that one. So this that I put up, so apologize for the confusion here. This is from NDTV. UN warns Britain over child voodoo victims and sex tourists. Hundreds of children are believed to have been kidnapped in Africa and brought to Britain for brutal voodoo rituals. A UN watchdog said today. So you can accuse me of racist, but take it up with the effing UN. Urging London to step up its fight against the scourge. We're concerned about reports that hundreds of children have been abducted from their families in Africa and trafficked to the UK, especially London, for religious rituals, said Kristen Sandberg, head of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. They are used in so-called voodoo rituals and are also ARD and sexually abused. I'm limited in what I can say on YouTube here, but you can go to the page. It should be obvious what I'm saying. Hard. The number of graped, can we say graped? And are also graped and sexually abused. I hate doing this, but it's YouTube. The number of convictions is extremely low, said the former Norwegian Supreme Court judge. British police are reported to have recorded scores of cases over the past decade of children who have faced torture and abuse as part of witchcraft rituals. The British government launched a campaign against faith-based child abuse in 2012, saying there was a need to make a stand, working with African migrant associations. Okay, real fun. That's sarcasm. Okay, next one. Here we go. This one I highly, if you're going to only look at a few, this is one, I'll tell you the few, this is definitely one to check out. Okay, so this is by Ana Dulce Garcia, New Issues in Refugee Research, Voodoo, Witchcraft, and Human Trafficking in Europe from the UN Refugee Agency, Policy Development and Evaluation Service. So take it up with them, haters. All right. The growing number of Africans... The growing numbers of Africans in Europe has led to the proliferation of marabouts, traditional African priests offering advice on how to obtain love and money or achieve success in business, get rid of the evil eye, or heal diseases. Also, in some African communities, children are being accused of practicing witchcraft, and voodoo threats have become one of the characteristics of African sex trafficking networks. In 2000, an Ivorian girl, that means from the Ivory Coast, was assassinated by her relatives who accused her of being possessed by an evil spirit. In 2005, an 8-year-old child was tortured by her guardians who feared she was a witch. And in 2010, an adolescent accused of practicing witchcraft was tortured and mutilated by his sister and her boyfriend. These are just a few examples. Scotland Yard has conducted 83 investigations of faith-based child abuse in the past decade. Cases have also been reported in France, the Netherlands, and Belgium. This is from 2013, so it's only gotten worse. The bulk of these crimes are committed by family members, guardians, aunts, uncles, and step-parents, but not by the parents themselves. Perpetrators of crimes against alleged child witches have mostly been Congolese, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Nigerian, and Angolan. As mentioned, the majority of these crimes have taken place in the UK, ironic since all these people were English, and although the majority of concerned or live in the UK, or did, and although the majority of concerned families are first or second generation migrants, about half of the abused children were born in that country. Here we go. Ritual oath ceremonies include body parts from the person on whom the oath is being administered, as well as from one of her relatives, usually her mother or sister. The use of body parts, such as fingernails, blood, sweat, teeth, and/or pubic hairs, give the voodoo priest possession of some part of the victim, creating a sense of fear and an unwillingness to speak out. Other magical items, such as animal blood, kola nuts, water, palm oil, earth taken from a graveyard, alcohol, and herbs, are also part of these ceremonies. Sometimes women are also asked to take baths and drink or eat magical food. In September 2001, this is very rough, in September 2001, the torso of a 5-year-old African boy was discovered floating in the River Thames. Further investigation showed that the boy was brought expressly from West Africa to be sacrificed in a witchcraft ritual. The boy was poisoned before his body was mutilated and drained of blood by an expert marabout. According to a report by the Metropolitan Police, children are being trafficked into the UK from Africa and used for human sacrifices. So here we've got lots of sources independently corroborating this. Once in Britain, they are exposed to violent and degrading treatments, often involving the forced extraction of their blood to be used for clients demanding blood rituals. Child testimonies reveal that marabouts usually take children's hair and cut their arms, legs, heads, and genitals and collect the blood. We do not know the numbers of children that are victims of this type of abuse, which is linked to blood rituals. However, it does appear that belief in such rituals is increasing the demand for African children. Cheery. All right. Next up, here's a specific case. Which child cruelty trio guilty? This is from 2005. 3 people have been convicted over the torture of an 8-year-old girl they thought was a witch. The Old Bailey heard the orphan was beaten, cut, and had chili peppers rubbed in her eyes to beat the devil out of her in Hackney, East London, which ironically is a hipster area. The girl's aunt was found guilty of child cruelty charges, while Sita Kasanga and her brother Sebastian Pinto were convicted of aiding and abetting. The cruelty started at the beginning of 2003 when a boy told his mother that the girl had been practicing witchcraft. It was an accusation the woman believed. Jurors were told that the child was cut with a knife and beaten with a belt and shoe to beat the devil out of her during her ordeal at a flat in Hackney, East London. During police interviews, the girl said Kasanga had cornered her in the kitchen and told her, "Today you die." The court also heard the girl, now 10, was put into a laundry bag and believed she would be thrown away into a river. Patricia May, prosecuting, said, "This child was treated as a scapegoat by family members, tormented, subjected to all sorts of assaults, which must have caused her considerable pain, fear, and distress." Okay, next up in Dear Old Blighty. So this looks like the previous version, has the same picture, but it's a different article. Come on, BBC, get some new art. So this is again from 2005. Listen closely to this. Hundreds of African boys have disappeared from London schools. Police investigating the murder of a boy whose torso was left in the Thames have said. Scotland Yard asked London education authorities how many black boys aged 4 to 7 had vanished from school. Between July and September 2001, 300 had disappeared. And police fear thousands may go missing annually. Thousands annually. From school in London. Child welfare experts say the figures hint at the scale of child trafficking, sometimes for labor or benefit fraud. A previous BBC investigation found some African children were being held by their parents' creditors so they could claim extra benefits. That's going to make more sense as we get further into how this stuff is done in Africa. The boy found, so it's not necessarily unconnected. The boy found in the River Thames in September 2001, called Adam by police, is thought to have been the victim of a ritual killing after being brought to London from Nigeria. Detective Chief Inspector Will O'Reilly said inquiries revealed 300 black boys of a similar age to Adam had not reported back to school in the 3 months before his death and were lost into the system. Despite an international search, police were able to find only 2 of them, Mr. O'Reilly said. Most of those questioned said the children had returned to Africa. All right. Next up in dear old Blighty. So this is National Geographic, but Wayback Machine. The link's there. London witchcraft murder traced to Africa child trade. National Geographic Channel, 2005. In September 2001, a gruesome discovery was made in London's River Thames. So this is just going to get more and more extreme in case you're having issues with it so far. The hideously mutilated torso of a small black boy was found floating through the city. The boy's arms, legs, and head had all been hacked off. So began a stranger-than-fiction detective story that led UK investigators into a macabre netherworld of witchcraft and child sacrifice. The autopsy report concluded that Adam's throat had been slit. His body, which was then deliberately drained of blood, his body was then deliberately drained of blood. Richard Hoskins, a UK-based expert on African religion and voodoo, says the Calabar bean, in combination with the other ingredients in Adam's gut, pointed to the West African country of Nigeria. There, witch doctors are known to use such potions for black magic. So this is the popular press. So the beans are ground down and then burnt in a pot. Taken together, this is the final clinching point that proves as near as certain that this was a sacrifice. The special police unit that investigates muti killings, as they're called, in South Africa, so mutilation killings for witchcraft, aka muti killings, estimates that there may be as many as 100 such murders in the country each year. So, again, independently corroborated, hundreds. Adam had been earmarked for human sacrifice. To find out why and by whom, murder squad detectives traveled to Nigeria and the city of Benin. They were beginning to close in on Adam's witchcraft killers thanks to the clues revealed by forensic science. All right. Now, the torso in the Thames. They're still trying to solve this mystery, so they were not able to solve it. So this is from 2021. I got Brave browser set up to block ads, so... Recommended, by the way. Okay. The torso in the Thames. So BBC News from 2021. It's the longest unsolved child murder case. Wow. It's the longest unsolved child murder case in the recent history of the Metropolitan Police. Good job, England. 20 years ago, as we see from recent events, they really care about kids. 20 years ago, a young African boy was murdered in a brutal ritual. His head and limbs removed and his torso dumped in the Thames. Experts agreed that because Adam's body had been expertly butchered, it had been a ritualistic murder. Some thought it had been one of the rare so-called muti killings found in southern Africa, when a victim's body parts are removed and used by witch doctors as medicine for a client who wants, for example, to win a business deal or secure good luck. Highly intelligent. Other experts believed it was more likely a human sacrifice with its origins in a twisted version of Yoruban belief systems from Nigeria, a perverted offering to the goddess Oshun, a deity typically associated with water and fertility. By the way, I don't know if anyone saw, but Diddy, right after he got arrested for human trafficking and all the horrible stuff he was doing, apparently Diddy has a full back tattoo of Oshun. That's no offense to Oshun, but it sure points to worse things than people may have guessed. The special police unit that investigates muti killings in South Africa estimates that there may be as many as 100 such murders in the country each year. Okay. Next up, more on Adam. This is just from Wikipedia. All right. So just to summarize a few points of this case, Adam was the name police gave to an unidentified male child whose torso was discovered in the River Thames in London, United Kingdom, on 21st September 2001. Investigators believe the child was likely from southwestern Nigeria, and that several days before his murder, he was trafficked to the United Kingdom for a Mudi ritual sacrifice. On 21st September 2001, the torso of a young boy was discovered in the River Thames near Tower Bridge in central London. Dubbed Adam by police officers, the unidentified remains belonged to a black male, around 4 to 8 years old, who had been wearing orange girl shoes. The post-mortem showed that Adam had been poisoned, his throat had been slit to drain the blood from his body, and his head and limbs had been expertly removed. Further forensic testing examined his stomach contents and trace minerals in his bones to establish that Adam had only been in the United Kingdom for a few days or weeks before he was murdered, and that he likely came from a region of southwestern Nigeria near Benin City, known as the birthplace of Vodou. This evidence led investigators to suspect that Adam was trafficked to Britain, specifically for a Mudi killing, a ritual sacrifice performed by a witch doctor that uses a child's body parts to make medicinal potions called Mudi. All right, and last one from this section, and then I'm going to check the chat. So, not that one, but... Okay, it's also, I think it's also part of this article. I might have messed it up. Okay. So this should be from the Murder for Body Parts article. So it's from this article. Yeah, I guess I got that link wrong. Okay. Mrs. Osi, so this is about the Mudi practice in South Africa. Mrs. Osiagede, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Osiagede or something, denied any involvement with the death of the young boy. Asked who killed him, she said a group of people. She added, they used him for a ritual in the water. This is about a similar killing in South Africa. Claiming the boy was 6 years old, he said, wait, no, I'm sorry. This is Adam. They interviewed somebody about Adam who corroborated it was a ritual. Okay, so this is not someone from the police. Mrs. Osiagede denied any involvement with the death of the young boy. Asked who killed him, she said a group of people. It was like True Detective. She added, they used him for a ritual in the water. Claiming the boy was 6 years old, she said he was a lively boy, a very nice boy. He was also intelligent. Detailed analysis of a substance in the boy's stomach was identified as a black magic potion. It included tiny clay pellets containing small particles of pure gold, an indication that Adam was the victim of a Mudi ritual killing in which it is believed that the body parts of children are sacred. Bodies are often disposed of in flowing water. Okay, so that's the UK section. And we're going to go to the EU next. Oh boy, Europeans. So let's check the chat. Let's check out super chats first. So Brandon, thank you. Thomas, thank you. Let me heart your posts. Very good. Thank you for everyone who's super chatting. 10 super chats and I make a video on my top occult movies, much more lighthearted. All right. So would Lighthouse be on my top 10? I have not seen it. Graviticus says grassroots and a strong community is the answer to the algorithm. Absolutely, absolutely. Magic and Math, that'd be a great video. Okay. Dominic says, Mr. Louv, I've been a fan for a long time. Thanks for everything you do. You're welcome and thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Harley says, enjoyed your talk with Damien Knuckles. Hope to do another one. Damien, by the way, Damien's DNA appeal was basically avoided again. Damien keeps trying to get his DNA testing. So, by the way, good example, right? I'm well aware that people can be falsely accused of things. That's why I've spent so much time corroborating things. Because Damien was falsely accused of something similar by crazy rednecks in West Memphis and paid the price for it. So it's why we have to be very careful about this type of thing and not go shooting off half-cocked. But it's also why we need to police this type of stuff so that we're not all falsely tarred with something that has nothing to do with us, right? And so this is one of the reasons why I'm so stern with this stuff, because if somebody doesn't hold the line, then occultism just degenerates into black tar, you know? So, all right. So let's see. Simon says, appreciate your fastidious research in journalism, Jason. Thank you very much. $10 super chat. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Simon. Good to see you back. Greatly appreciate that. And Thomas Smith sent an email. Look forward to response. Awesome. Another 5 from Brandon. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Okay. And I'm not going to be able to read all the comments, but okay. So this is disrespectful to voodoo as a spiritual practice. Well, hang in there is all I say. Is it odd? Yeah, it sure is effing odd. But tell me that after we're finished reading all this, okay? This is odd, not too different from calling out Christian pedos. Well, all pedophiles must be called out. Nobody gets a pass. Somebody's just asking questions. Everyone look up the phrase sea lioning. Sea lioning. I'm just gonna... This is a very helpful concept. Okay, so... Whoops. I'm just going to post this so the people who watch these are aware of this. Sea lioning, also sea lioning and sea lioning, okay, is a type of trolling and harassment that consists of pursuing people with relentless requests for evidence, often tangential or previously addressed, while maintaining a pretense of civility and sincerity. I'm just trying to have a debate, or I'm just asking questions, and feigning ignorance of the subject matter. It may take the form of incessant bad faith invitations to engage in debate. I just got this on Facebook, and has been likened to a denial of service attack targeted at human beings. There we go. Okay, so no sea lioning. Thank you, and kindly. Thank you kindly. Okay. All right. Talking about ecology. Brandon says, I can honestly say I don't know how you could do such deep dive on this because it affected me, and because people made it my problem. White voodoo people made this my problem by consistently demonizing me for pointing out the obvious. So you can thank them for digging their own grave, which I intend to put them in. Metaphorically, of course. Ron says, but I appreciate it. It is a very hard topic, and one of the reasons why this topic is so hard is people don't want to look at things. This is not just Vodon, but it applies to human trafficking, it applies to child abuse, it applies to PDF file networks. People don't want to look at it because it's too evil. It's just pure evil. SB, if you're cursed by voodoo, is it serious or nonsense? Well, I'm still here, and I've been pissing them off for nigh on 30 years now. So you tell me, right? By the way, here's me in Congo Square in New Orleans. I live near New Orleans, and I have family there, and I love New Orleans. Right, and here's me with my trusty magic wand right next to Congo Square, which is where voodoo got started in the U.S. So come at me, bro. If voodoo curses were real, they would have gotten past old me, but they haven't because they got nothing. Whereas I have a magic wand, so they can F off. Okay. Ann says, oh my God, this is horrible. Just wait. So JSAP says, so voodoo is not real. So I cover it earlier in that article. So again, go to And Voodoo Trafficking or rewind the video, where I basically say that voodoo is an actual religion, okay, but all of this terrorism and psychological terrorism is just that. It's just psychological bluff and preying on, unfortunately, people who don't have the education to see that this stuff is not real, right? And when I teach magic, I basically teach meditation, goal setting. The type of magic I teach is real magic, meaning the magic that you undertake to have influence over yourself, to make yourself, for instance, more productive, less lazy, more fulfilled, happier. It's not actually possible to magically control other people, but people will make you think that just to F with you. And some of you, one of the best thing ever said about this is by the terrible rapper Riff Raff, if anyone remembers him, where he did this article for Vice where they did rapid fire questions, and they asked him, is voodoo real? And he said something like, you know, life is bad, and bad things happen in life. So some people say they'll put a curse on you, they'll put voodoo on you, but really it wasn't voodoo, it was just life. Just like the wisdom of the Buddha. But voodoo as a there are millions of voodoo practitioners all over the world. What I'm saying is they don't have supernatural power, and if they do, it's probably delusional. Look, voodoo has let me put it this way. Voodoo has supernatural power over the people who allow it to have power over them. So if you don't, no problem. Simon says this is pure evil, nothing less. Yeah. So while they don't have supernatural power, there absolutely is a real thing called voodoo, and everything I'm reading actually happens. Catherine says this sounds like a European thing, not a voodoo thing. Oh, Catherine, Karen Kier. Just wait. Just wait. Brandon, damn, this must have been hard to research this. Yes, this took about 3 months. Oh, Simon, I remember that in London. The press didn't know how to handle it. Damn. I'm curious what people were saying at the time. Zedekiah, I've looked at some voodoo and it just seems like another esoteric system, which others also have issues like these. Just wait, Karens. Just wait, my sweet, sweet Karens. My sweet occult Karens. I love you so much with your dodges and your silliness. Just wait. Much of it gets passed off as bad parenting, yeah. Alakaya M888 is saying, I'm using a catch-all term voodoo rather than the specific. No, these people are using voodoo. Just wait, my occult Karens. Just wait. Just wait. This is uncalled for. Just wait, kids. See, I'm using Brave Browser. Yeah. Interesting. The answer says, my family practices Santeria when I came to America from Cuba. I don't really have a whole lot of issues with Santeria. I think it's a lot more benign, but there's definitely dark stuff in it, particularly. We'll get to that too. When I came to America from Cuba, I was only a kid. They threw away my saints because they had chicken blood on them. Oh, that sucks. That sucks. Dominic says this is horrible, but it's so interesting. Okay, got people. All right. A lighthearted video will be great after this. Just wait. Oh, it gets so much darker. Okay. Desert Dweller, and then I'll go back to it, says, on a previous podcast or office hours, you once threatened that you could make the paint start peeling off the walls. These streams definitely feel like you're doing that finally. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. All right. So people are going to be like I see lots of comments in the comments. I'm going to summarize it like this, okay? This is what people are doing in the comments. We've already put up the sea lioning, so I'm just going to arm you so you can see through this so I don't have to respond to every single time people do this. What all these people are doing, trying to deflect for whatever reason, I mean, God knows. People are just afraid of conflict, I think. And they're afraid to take a moral line on anything, potentially because they're worried about their own moral status and that they'll be judged. What all these people are doing in the comments is the no true Scotsman fallacy. So, no true Scotsman or appeal to purity is an informal fallacy in which one modifies a prior claim in response to a counterexample by asserting the counterexample is excluded by definition. Rather than admitting error or providing evidence to disprove the counterexample, the original claim is changed by using a non-substantive modifier such as true, pure, genuine, authentic, real, or similar terms. That's not the true voodoo. That's not the genuine voodoo. Philosophy professor Bradley Dowden explains the fallacy as an ad hoc rescue of a refuted generalization attempt. The following is a simplified rendition of the fallacy. Person A, no Scotsman put sugar on his porridge. Person B, but my Uncle Angus is a Scotsman and he puts sugar on his porridge. Person A, but no true Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. And that's all it is, right? That's where all it is. And people do this all the effing time. They've done that when I bring up Islam. They've done it. Marxists love to bring this up. It's like, oh, the Soviet Union wasn't real Marxism. Yeah, the hell it wasn't. Okay, it was the only time it was actually fully effectively operationalized. So there you have it. People are doing no true Scotsman fallacies. Why? Presumably they're threatened by this. I don't know. But there you have it. No true Scotsman, so I don't have to respond to every single one of these. And if they get really frustrated, they're going to start playing the race card, so look out for that. And that's just to shut down dialogue and get me to stop talking about it. So you really have to ask yourself, why would somebody do such a thing? And I'll just leave it at this. If If trafficking and killing African children is the hill you want to die on, go right ahead, my occult Karens, my precious occult Karens. Go right ahead and do that, and everyone will see it. All right, let's get into it. Oh, it gets worse. Voodoo trafficking and sex slavery in the European Union. Here we go. All right. So this is Springer. So again, academic, peer-reviewed press. This is peer-reviewed, my dear Karens. The silenced coercion of voodoo over Nigerian women trafficked from West Africa to Europe. The use of voodoo in the trafficking of Nigerian women is a practice that has created a climate of fear and silence among victims. Voodoo rituals are employed to bind the women to their traffickers, compelling them to obey orders and discouraging them from seeking help from authorities. European traffickers have adopted these practices, recognizing their effectiveness in maintaining control over their victims. By the way, people who want to claim this is just European, just to pull up something I'm going to get to later so I don't bury the lead, 50,000 children a year are trafficked into the UK and Europe from Benin for European pedophile networks by Africans. 50,000 a year. So it takes two to tango, my dears. It takes two to tango. This ain't just white people, although they definitely have a part in it. This is systemic. European traffickers have adopted these practices, recognizing their effectiveness in maintaining control over their victims. These rituals involve the use of personal items such as hair or blood, which are believed to give the traffickers control over the victim's spirits. In the UK, law enforcement agencies have documented cases where voodoo rituals were used to coerce Nigerian women into sex work. These women are often trafficked by European gangs who exploit their belief in voodoo to ensure compliance and silence. So European, it's a little unclear what it means, but it probably means some combination of white Europeans and European trafficking networks that are not white, that are connected to Africa. But they're not specific about this. The psychological impact of these rituals is profound, creating a sense of hopelessness and helplessness among the women. Many victims believe that breaking the oath will lead to severe consequences, including death or madness. So people asked if voodoo is real. Supernaturally, no. But if you have somebody that you've hypnotized and convinced that if you break an oath, they're going to get sick and die, psychosomatic effects can do the rest. Which is why I say that voodoo has no power over you unless you believe in it. But if you believe in it, let alone if you're raised to believe that it's the law of the universe, yeah, it sure does have power over you. And when you can't go to the authorities, basically what they do is they make people convinced that even if they do go to the authorities, even if they physically escape, they can't escape the spirits which are invisible and everywhere. It's psychological terrorism and a psychological control method. A lot of religions are. Certainly not the only one. The fear of hell in Christianity is another one. Many victims believe that breaking the oath will lead to severe consequences, including death or madness. This belief system effectively traps them in a cycle of exploitation, making it extremely difficult for them to escape or seek help. Investigations have revealed that traffickers in Europe, including the UK, use these voodoo practices to maintain control over large networks of women, ensuring compliance and reducing the risk of exposure. The fear induced by these rituals is a powerful tool. So there you go. The fear induced by these rituals, not the rituals, but the fear induced by them, is a powerful tool, making it unnecessary for traffickers to use physical violence or confinement to keep their victims in line. Let me read that again. The fear induced by these rituals is a powerful tool, making it unnecessary for traffickers to use physical violence or confinement to keep their victims in line. The prevalence of voodoo coercion in trafficking cases involving Nigerian women in Europe has significant implications for law enforcement and victim support services. Traditional approaches to combating trafficking may be ineffective unless they address the unique psychological and cultural dimensions of voodoo-induced control. There is a need for specialized training and resources to help European authorities understand and dismantle these coercive practices. This is another reason why I feel that it's important for me to speak out about this, because you can imagine somebody with my rather bizarre background and skill set has a better understanding of these things than, or certainly has an understanding of these things that could be helpful to police, right? Which I'm happy to do. All right, next up, because I know a lot about voodoo. Trafficked by voodoo threats. One of the largest operations in Europe rescues 39 Nigerian women. So this is from Europol. Okay, so if you guys want to, if guys and girls, if you want to Karen out and say that I'm misrepresenting voodoo or racist or whatever, take it up with Europol, European Police Agency. Okay, all right. The Spanish Guardia Civil, in collaboration with the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, from Nigeria, and the UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, yeah, so this is conspiracy blogs. No, this is reality, dismantled a Nigerian organized crime group in one of the largest operations against trafficking in human beings in Europe. Victims were transferred from Nigeria to Europe via Libya and Italy. Once in Spain, the women were kept in squalid conditions in cave houses in Almeria, where they were exploited in prostitution to pay off the 30,000 euro debt they owed to the criminal organization. The highly active Nigerian criminal network was linked to the EIYE Brotherhood, which is known for being one of the most influential confraternities in Nigeria. They operate in clandestine groups all over the world, funding the Brotherhood in Nigeria through both licit and illicit activities, in some cases through organized crime and, in particular, trafficking human beings. One of the most important members of the organization was a well-known DJ in Nigeria who was arrested when he was returning from his country where he was recording a music video. His main role was to transfer the victims to Spain and organize sexual exploitation in several Spanish provinces. The crime ring transferred and laundered the money using the Hawala system. Police officers carried out 41 house searches in Alicante, Almeria, Barcelona, Cantabria, Madrid, Malaga, Murcia, Navarra, Seville, Toledo, in Vizcaya in Spain, and Manchester in the United Kingdom. The bank accounts used by the organization to launder more than 300 euros from the illicit activity have been blocked. In total, the operation resulted in 89 arrests and 39 victims were safeguarded. Whew. Well, that's the one they've caught. All right, next up, CNN. Okay, lest anyone accuse me of being some far-right ideologue, here's CNN, okay, an extremely liberal outlet. All right. Yeah. They faced voodoo death threats and forced prostitution. Now they're safe, police say. So this is 2018. 16 Nigerian women are safe after they were threatened with death and tricked to work as prostitutes in return for passage to Spain, the European Union's law enforcement agency said Thursday. 11 people were arrested in Zaragoza, Spain, in connection with the trafficking plot, Europol said, adding that their criminal network operated mainly in Spain, Italy, Germany, and Denmark. The women reflect a recent wave of Nigerians who have headed to Europe from Benin City, where poverty and traditional witchcraft suffocate opportunity. The journey can be fraught for women and girls who face a particular risk of exploitation. Promised a better life in Spain, the 16 women were moved by land from Nigeria to Libya, then to Italy by sea, and from there into Spain, Europol said. Once on the Spanish territory, they were handed over to a madam and forced into prostitution until they paid off their debt, the agency said. Voodoo threats leveled by traffickers. The women also were pressured under voodoo threats to pledge to pay for their transport and not to report their exploiters to police, Europol said. Okay, so this is critical. This method, used by criminal organizations with women from Western Africa, aims to control women under threat of death for them or their family members if they do not comply with that commitment, the agency said. And so they convince them that they can reach them anywhere with invisible means. And so sometimes this is what, quote, magic looks like in the real world, and it's awful. And it's just psychological head games that result in true human suffering. And this is why it's so critical to distinguish right from wrong in this field, and good and evil, because they both are, there is good and evil. As you can see here, I hope. In some cases, traffickers can control their victims using phone contact alone, Europol said. The number of potential sex trafficking victims arriving in Italy by sea has increased 600% since 2014, with the majority of victims arriving from Nigeria, A July report by the International Organization for Migration estimates 80% of all women and girls arriving from Nigeria to Europe are potential victims of trafficking. 80%. For sexual exploitation, the group estimates, noting that exploitation of younger girls has been on the rise. Oh, man. I just want to say something. They do say that if you gaze into the abyss gazes back into you. And I've spent my whole life gazing into the abyss. So if the abyss is going to gaze back at me, can you please at least leave a like and subscribe and hit that notifications bell? That for everyone, please. Give me a follow. All right, ResearchGate. Got to go through Cloudflare. All right, here we go. Here's this unbelievable conspiracy far-right source, the University of Oxford, European Journal of Criminology. All right. Human trafficking for sexual exploitation from Nigeria into Western Europe. The role of voodoo rituals in the functioning of a criminal network. This is from the European Journal of Criminology from 2016 by Charlotte Barda at the University of Oxford. Human trafficking networks are comparable to drug trafficking rings in terms of their flexibility. When parts of trafficking rings are successfully removed through police intervention, the remaining network can often be adjusted in order to continue business. Voodoo, or juju, is a form of witchcraft in Nigeria existing alongside Christian or Islamic belief. Since the 1980s, there has been a resurgence of voodoo priests who seem to cater specifically to the needs of human trafficking. Before leaving Nigeria, traffickers lead recruited women to ancient shrines where this is real, where voodoo priests perform rituals, which can include the eating of chicken hearts, superficial cutting of the body with razors, and the beheading of goats. This is getting bunched up. Voodoo plays into fears and beliefs that are latently present in Nigerian culture, which are then abused and adjusted into rituals specifically for the advantage of human traffickers. Voodoo distinguishes the Nigerian modus operandi from other human trafficking streams. For example, in Eastern European rings, direct monitoring is often necessary. Lover boys bring women to Western Europe and exploit them under the threat of violence in case of defiance. In contrast, Nigerian networks can exercise remote control. So you can see how building up this hypnotic climate of just total fear is in itself obviously a form of black magic. Not supernatural, but just purely evil, psychologically. This is humans being awful to other humans so that they can be controlled remotely. So I want you to notice in almost every single thing that I read, and it will get much more explicit when we get to Haiti, in almost every single thing that I read, there is an element of slavery to voodoo. And I talk about that at the beginning of this, but there is an element of the loss of personal autonomy through fear, or when we get to Haiti, through biochemical means, which is even worse. So I want you to pay attention to that. That's why I'm saying this is part of the modern day architecture of slavery, which still exists and has never gone away. Recruited women are made to go through elaborate voodoo rituals in Nigeria to enforce a contract, which dictates that they will repay their enormous debt. The terror-inducing rituals lead to a situation where the women will not run away when traveling on their own, out of fear for themselves or their family being hurt by voodoo. The number of Nigerian victims of human trafficking for sexual exploitation is among the highest of any ethnicity in Western Europe, next to victims from Eastern Europe. Each year, hundreds of Nigerian women are being trafficked to Europe. Dire economic circumstances and images of a romanticized future in Europe play Nigerian women into the hands of human traffickers. When Nigerian women are intercepted in European asylum centers, questioning by the police is often complicated by a fear of occult voodoo contracts that prevents the women from talking. So this is like the human trafficker's wet dream. Sorry. To be able to control people remotely in other countries through suggestion. Okay. Next up. The United Nations. UN migration. Okay. Cursed or blessed, Nigerian victims of trafficking can finally break the oath. So this is from the UN on Medium from 2018. IOM UN migration, so UN agency. For the past 3 years, so this is 2018, the majority of people arriving in Italy by sea were Nigerian. 59% of all victims of trafficking, VOT, assisted by IOM, the UN Migration Agency, in 2016 were Nigerians. The organization estimates that a staggering 80%, there we go, there's that number independently corroborated, a staggering 80% of Nigerian women and girls arriving by sea that year were trafficked for sexual exploitation. In addition to paying large sums of money to their traffickers, Nigerian VOTs often submitted to a voodoo rite which bound them by contract to their traffickers. The so-called contract, among other things, prohibits victims from revealing the names of their traffickers and other details that may lead to the identification of exploiters. Victims are too scared to break it because they are made to fear that bad things will happen to them and their families if they do. As IOM Italy reported last year, this voodoo bond is an obstacle to the protection of VOTs. Some, like Precious, a 17-year-old Nigerian girl who was assisted by IOM in Italy, often cannot sleep because they are afraid the voodoo rite will kill them. So powerful is the bond that Precious would often run away from the center where she was sheltered by knotting sheets together to climb out the window. Okay, so that's the end of the Europe section. So before we get to Africa, let's check the chat, shall we? So remember, 7 more super chats, and you get the much, much more lighthearted palate cleanser of my favorite occult movies. All right, where are we at here? Simon says about Adam, I remember them focusing on trying to identify the body, not the reasoning on why it happened. It seemed to leave a huge hole in the story and then disappeared. Yeah, that's pretty shocking when you see that even sources at the time were talking about hundreds of boys disappearing, and I think girls disappearing from London schools every year. SB, why do you think it's just a failure? It's just a failure. We don't need to make it political beyond that, I don't think, since this is such a hot topic about the UK right now, but it is what it is. SB, why do you think so many people from the West sweep cover for this? Is it literally just more racism? Man, I've been trying to figure that out. I don't want to misgender you, but I've been trying to figure that out for decades. And I think it's a combination of fear of being called racist, which is ridiculous. Again, if you don't want to speak out about African women and children being tortured, violated, and trafficked, I would suggest that you are covering for slavery. But in people's minds, it's like, oh, I don't want to be called racist. Okay, so you want to be so not racist that you cover for slavery. How does that make any sense? They're not thinking it through. I think that there's been a real effort on the academic left and also pop culture left to resuscitate voodoo as some type of symbol of anti-colonial resistance because of the slave revolt in Haiti, which we'll get to, which is a total misperception and a Western whitewashing of the tradition. I think that in America, it's possible that one of the reasons why Haiti and voodoo don't get talked about a lot is because the Clintons were involved in it. And I mean, like, I can source that from Bill Clinton's biography. Okay, so that's not and Hillary's, their autobiographies. You know, they were involved in voodoo, and they were heavily involved in Haiti, where they basically, from what I understand, I don't want to speak out of turn, but Haiti basically blames the Clintons for destroying their country because they went down and I don't think they even subsidized, but they made sure that grain production stopped in Haiti so that Bill Clinton's grain producing friends in Arkansas could corner the market and sell it for more and destroy the country in the process. And were involved in voodoo rituals. And again, this is not QAnon. This is coming from Bill Clinton's autobiography, which I don't feel like pulling off the shelf right now, but it's in there. Look in the index. My Life by Bill Clinton. It's in the index. So, but, you know, if anyone has any ideas on why there's such a blockade talking, I also think that just people aren't aware of it because this just isn't reported in the Western media. And that's a failure of media and government, but not people not having the access to the information. Well, now you have access to the information because I'm making sure you do. So let's see what people do now. Thomas, would closing the borders reduce the amount of trafficking? Well, I don't know about Europe. I think it would in the US. Absolutely. And but that doesn't have anything to do with this issue. And that's the US. Thankfully, as far as I can tell, there are not human trafficking networks going into the US, or I just haven't found data on them in terms of from Africa. So I may be wrong and I just don't have the data on it. Fox says, thank you for keeping it real, Jason. You're the best. I appreciate it. Okay, Freemasons do not use the same teachings. Freemasons are like a senior citizens club. So let's not get going with conspiracy theories. One of the reasons why I hate conspiracy theories is because, look, if you want evidence of evil shit in the world and evil groups and government and corporate malfeasance, you can find all of it easily. Go to the public library, read newspapers, read the academic sources. Hell, get on Wikipedia, and you'll find more than you could ever deal with in your entire life. You don't need to go hog wild making things up, because and in fact, I am quite angry when people make things up, because it becomes a smokescreen and it prevents people from seeing the truth rather than shows them the truth. Classic example, 9/11 truthers. Look, we know let's look at this from a couple different angles. If you want to accuse the US government of 9/11, why? We know for a fact they lied about weapons of mass destruction. Do you ever hear people talking about that? No. They talk about the non-starting issue about 9/11. Or look at it from the other angle. Let's say, as I believe, that 9/11 is exactly as straightforward as it looks, and it was done by Muslims. Obviously, it's exactly what it looks like. Well, now blaming the government, it's the same thing as when people blame this Noam Chomsky thing. Anything bad that happens anywhere, it's the U.S. government's fault. Not only is this false, jingoistic, somewhat racist, but it's just a conflict avoidance tactic, because you know the U.S. government isn't going to mess with you. Unlike if you start criticizing Islam, for instance. So it's just cowardice. If you blame it on, it's like blaming it on your parents. It's cowardice, right? Okay. Fox says, I grew up in Caribbean Santoria, and you are not saying anything that everyone else doesn't already know in those circles. Thank you for the sunlight. I appreciate that. Dan Harm. Stop, you're going to make Marco Visconti cry. Mom's Basement Marco. That guy. What a rat. He's just a rat. That guy is this Mom's Basement person who lives to just troll other people who have succeeded. Like me, like Gordon White he messed with, like Damien Eccles. He totally trolled Damien Eccles, who spent 20 years on death row. You're going to pick on him from your mom's basement with your Cheetos? By the way, if you want to call people fascists, you're from the country that invented fascism, that has a problem with fascism right now. So if you really are an anti-fascist, go take it up with Casa Pound. Go fight the actual fascists in your country, and then maybe we'll take you seriously, loser. Fucking ridiculous person. So JSAP, so are you claiming the rituals they're doing are true or not? They're real, I'm just saying they're not supernatural. The rituals are real, and they induce psychological control and fear by the power of suggestion, and they rely on the person's lack of education to do that, in the same way that, fire and brimstone church services can. So again, not supernatural, but real forms of psychological control through suggestion. All right. Sutex says trauma-based mind control. That's probably a good way to put it. Slave gods. Yeah, no, literally. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Billy Clinton. All right. Where was it Marco went at Damien? I think it was in... Marco created this Discord group of all these people claiming that Damien abused them, and then it turned out to be just dreams they had, where you have all these people fixated on this famous person with parasocial relationships. And it's just so stupid. And then he was harassing all these women on Instagram who were following Damien, just contacting them out of the blue, I know stuff about Damien that's gonna blow the lid off. It's just go fuck yourself. Go do something with your life instead of trying to, he's is a net detriment to the occult community, and he needs to get a life. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a Vatican agent, because he sure acts like one. A lot of these people who claim to be magicians these days, they're anything but. Just to get to get supernatural, and you can take this for what you will. I wouldn't be surprised if if all the people claiming to be magicians now were actually the witch burners who had to reincarnate as the people they burned, and they're continuing their same bullshit. All right. Back to the horrors. Voodoo trafficking and child abuse in Benin, Nigeria, Togo, the Ivory Coast, and elsewhere in Africa. All right, U.S. State Department, again, conspiracy blogs. This is a different report than before. Whoops. Don't forget, super chats. If you want a lighthearted palate cleanser. Yes, I'm not kidding, unfortunately, silly dilly 00. I'm not. Beninese officials reported that traffickers are increasingly using Vodon curses as a means to control female Beninese trafficking victims. By the way, Gordon White wrote a hilarious response to Mom's Basement Marco on his blog, where he's just like, F off, you effing bully. And I gained a lot of respect for Gordon for that. I thought that was great. I thought it was well worded, so you can go see that as well. I think he made some zingers there. Yeah, it's just like you're dragging everything down. Not only are you not adding anything, you're just making life difficult for everyone because you're butthurt that you don't have more attention or whatever. Well, do something with your life. All right. Beninese officials reported that traffickers are increasingly using Vodon curses as a means to control female Beninese trafficking victims. The government, by the way, he messed with Scarlet Imprint, he messed with Alan Chapman, basically like anybody who he perceives as, I don't know, getting attention that he thinks he should be getting, he goes after with ridiculous nonsense. He's a parasite. Beninese officials reported that traffickers are increasingly using Vodon curses as a means to control female Beninese trafficking victims. The government reported traffickers exploit children living in the lakeside areas of Benin, including the commune of Soava in southeast Benin. In debt bondage, criminal elements operate in urban areas under the guise of informal employment agents and recruit children for domestic work in private residences, where house managers and families exploit them in domestic servitude. Reports indicate criminal groups fraudulently recruit young Beninese women for domestic work in Lebanon, Algeria, and Persian Gulf countries. There you go. Muslim slavery, Islamic slavery networks that are straight plugged in. And subsequently exploit them in forced labor or sex trafficking. The government increased law enforcement efforts. Authorities did not report identifying any foreign or adult trafficking victims. Additionally, the government did not have adequate protection services for adults. The government reported initiating investigations into 176 individuals, including 101 for sex trafficking, 3 for forced labor, and 72 for unspecified forms of trafficking. This compared with not reporting initiation of any investigations during the previous reporting period. The government also reported continuing investigations into 312 individuals, including 157 for sex trafficking, 51 for forced labor, and 104 for unspecified forms of trafficking. Benin has been the largest source country for trafficking victims in the Republic of the Congo, with the Department of Ouem, I think that's how it's pronounced, in southeast Benin, historically an area traffickers use to recruit child victims. Reports indicate that traffickers fraudulently recruit young Beninese women for domestic work in Lebanon, Algeria, and Persian Gulf countries. Oh, that's a repeat. Okay. I actually repeated that. All right. Oh, it gets worse. Okay. This has a video attached to it. Okay, and I'm going to show you some of this. But before I do that, let me read the key excerpts from it, and then I'll show you the actual stuff. So again, here's video documentary evidence. You can see it for yourself. So this is from UK Channel 4, Unreported World, 7 years ago, British Public Broadcast Service. Or actually, this was aired in 2008. And this is actually quite hard to find online. Thankfully, they finally re-uploaded it. It used to only be on Vimeo. They uploaded it 7 years ago. It was very hard to find. Parents, desperate to fulfill Vodou's demands, sometimes resort to sending their children away to work in order to afford these expensive rituals. The effects of Vodou on children are especially poignant, with many being trafficked or forced into labor to pay for ceremonies or falling prey to Vodou converts. voodoo convents, where secrecy and possession are commonplace. Get my headphones. Stories of children sold into slavery, like Christine, who endured years of abuse, paint a harrowing picture of the intersection between voodoo, poverty, and exploitation in Benin. The cycle of poverty perpetuated by voodoo ceremonies leads many families to make difficult choices, sacrificing their children's education and well-being in the process. Gin is poured to appease the voodoo spirits, a series of blessings and offerings to the spirits as we enter the area. Here, children are taught voodoo secrets. We've been invited in to meet the chief trainer and the chief priest, and a stream of these young children just walked in, and some of them looked to me to be possibly 2, even 1 years old. In Benin, 40,000, okay, so it's 40,000. In Benin, 40,000 children are sold into what amounts to little more than slavery every year, many to pay for voodoo. So I got that wrong. It's not 50,000, but it's also not just for Europeans. It's in slavery in Africa. It also includes for child soldiers. So in Benin alone, which is only one of the countries involved in this, 40,000 children are sold into what amounts to little more than slavery every year, many to pay for voodoo. So again, occult people, my dear occult Karens, including Mom's Basement, you know who. If sending children into slavery, both in Africa, as child soldiers and labor and prostitution, and then into Europe for pedophiles and ritual murder, if that's the hill you want to die on, go ahead and do that in public for everyone to see. We'll wait. All right, let's show you some of this video. And let's see here. Should have it pulled up. All right. Okay. So I don't know how much I can show of this due to copyright, but I think if I comment on top of it.
West African country of Benin, where 2/3 of the population worship voodoo gods. Here in Segbahe, an ancient law enforcement ritual is underway. It's a scene that's been played out across Benin for
Law enforcement.
years.
These are the Zangbeto, which are meant to be the guardian spirits. They're like the voodoo police force, and they were used traditionally to keep order in the village.
The villagers say these whirling haystacks are to be feared. They believe they're inhabited by voodoo spirits, always on the lookout for wrongdoers. Anyone they catch causing trouble in the village will be punished.
All right, let's.
Our guide, Martin de Souza, is a liberal.
So this also has voodoo people that are working against this. So it's important to show that as well. This is the only person I've ever seen from that tradition that has been working against it. The only person ever. But it's worth highlighting her because she's clearly trying to clean up the tradition. And so that's great.
Voodoo priestess.
Do people still believe this?
Yes, of course.
This is very real for
Yes,
people.
it's very real. They still believing because Vodou is in our everyday life. Vodou keeps eyes on everybody. Vodou is very important. Even without Vodou, we could not be walking because we are walking on the land, which is Vodou.
And do you think today people would prefer the Zangbeto here to keep order or the modern police force?
I prefer Zangbeto because the police.
So here's this liberal voodoo priestess who's a reformist wants these psychological terror methods to continue, this policing by invisible spirits. Oh, here we go. Truth to power millions. As a practitioner, I expected you to be. I hate this. I'm so disappointed in you. Happy to disappoint, my dear Karen. Keep watching is all I have to say. I don't care about your expectations. I care about the truth. And again, if this is the hill you want to die on, go do it in public.
I'm told that training takes place in what are called voodoo convents, and there are thousands of them in villages across.
Oh, you can't hear it. God. All right. Well, let's try. Yeah, that confuses me because it looks like it's turned all the way up. You can't hear it at all? No. Oh, jeez. Really? Okay, let's add computer audio then. It says it has. Okay. Tell me if you can hear this.
The country.
So this is one of the oldest voodoo shrines and convents in the Burma.
gin is poured to appease the voodoo spirits.
Series of blessings and offerings to the spirits as we enter the area. Bonsoir.
Here, children are taught voodoo's secrets.
We've been invited in to meet the chief trainer and the chief priest, and a stream of these young children just walked in.
I'm gonna have to figure this out. I don't know.
Possibly.
Okay, we won't spend too much time on it.
And the one
So here this is a voodoo convent. This is where he's seeing 1 and 2 year olds.
child sitting on a chair, I'm told, is a high priest because she has a big spirit.
Na is the high priest, 5 years of her earnings to pay for Mirabelle's initiation.
That's a lot of money to pay. What happens if you can't pay? If she can't find the money and she says she doesn't know how she's going to find that money, then she'll stay in the temple forever and serve the temple.
So I don't know if you caught that since it's low, but these children have been trafficked into debt. They're in this temple because they've been sold by their parents to pay off debts. So often what happens is because people can't afford medical care, the voodoo priests come into the villages, say, we'll, do a procedure, we'll claim to heal you for something for $500 or $600. Oh, you can't pay it? Well, we'll take one of your kids. And if the kid can't pay their way off, well, they get to be a slave forever. I've also heard people tell me that some of these kids are blinded, so they can't leave the convent. I can't corroborate that because that was a first-hand thing that somebody told me, but there you go.
We're interrupted by the priestess. She seemed uncomfortable with our inquiries about Mirabelle's future and the cost of her stay.
What's happening there, Martin? We're told.
Benin is cripplingly poor. The UN says that more than half the population scrape by on less than £1 a day.
We're now heading further north into one of the poorest parts of Benin.
We've come to the village of Djedjbe to speak to a woman who's in debt to voodoo.
There you go.
Her name is Adonissi, and I meet her with her extended family. They explained how she owes a huge sum to voodoo for her child.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. These are neo-voodooists. These are people in Benin who are enslaving kids. So I don't want to hear it.
5 of her children had died young, so she sought voodoo's help with her last pregnancy. But if the child survived, it would have to be given to voodoo and initiated at her expense.
When the child was born, she felt she didn't have enough money to pay for the very expensive voodoo ceremonies when the child is taken to voodoo for initiation, so she refused. And then voodoo priests came to her and actually took the child by force to the voodoo shrine.
So these are the same kids that get then trafficked.
The priests said they'd release the child if Adonissi agreed to pay for her initiation. She said she couldn't negotiate because she was afraid the spirits would kill her child.
How much money do you have to pay for the ceremonies?
She's borrowing money to pay for the initiation.
Adonis is saying that the ceremony, it will cost about 150,000 Central African francs. That's about £200. Now she earns about 12 pence a day, she says, collecting firewood, and her husband is unemployed. So at that rate it would take them many years, about 5 years, to pay for the ceremony.
It's child trafficking.
Families deal with the extreme poverty here in Benin is to send their children away from home to find work. And we're going to a part of the country further north here where this is a very common practice.
Arid land, rapid population.
By the way, see that comment, Truth to Power Millions? I fucking told you people were gonna use the No True Scotsman. I told you.
Population growth and poor education have created Benin's crushing poverty. But it's becoming clear to me that the cost of voodoo often makes it worse. As well as being a voodoo priestess, Martine is a child rights activist who wants to stop children being trafficked for money.
So why are you still angling for psychological control mechanisms for them then?
Here they have many wives, a lot of children, and they are very poor. So to solve their problems, they prefer to send the child away.
And what do you try and do out here?
Up here, I'm trying to do public awareness. Most of this population, they know nothing about the child mistreatment.
I've been told that voodoo initiation often ends a child's formal education because the parents can't then afford to keep sending them to school.
We were just driving past and we noticed it looks like an open-air school, so we've come in to have a look.
All right. So I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's faint and it does a disservice just to play it faintly, but take a look. I put a link. If you look in the comments to this video, I put a watch next, and then I put a link to this video, or you can search children sold to pay voodoo debts in Benin. Okay. So there we have that. Please, please, please watch that whole video. I really think you should because it's great and I don't want to mess it up. All right. I don't want to do a disservice by just playing parts of it faintly. All right. So we're still on Africa. Oh boy. Okay, so that was Channel 4. What do we got next? Haha, I'm back. All right, and all right. Okay, so we got the BBC. All right, so let's get some more. So that's just one source, okay? So if you disbelieve any of these sources, there's lots more. All right, let's go to CNN, a right-wing fascist organization. CNN, one of the most liberal outlets in the U.S. All right. These children were confined to a voodoo convent. This is from 2016. In Benin, when children fall sick, their parents often turn to voodoo. The West African nation is, after all, its spiritual home. Officially a state religion since 1996, voodooism is practiced by 17% of the population, with many outside of the religion professing a cultural link to some of its rituals. But what happens inside the hundreds of facilities dotting the country is a mystery to most outsiders. Dominic asks, I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, because why are so many in debt? Because it's unbelievably poor there. It's unbelievably poor. Same as in Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Now advocates are raising the alarm, saying the facilities may harm the children they aim to help. Those who practice voodooism believe that illness is caused by evil spirits. If children fall sick, their parents seek treatment through voodoo gods. The children allegedly possessed by spirits can be sent or even sold to be healed in voodoo convents, notes Hadrian Banaud, a communication specialist for UNICEF based in Benin. So take it up with UNICEF, guys, my dear Karens. The ceremonies that are meant to heal these children are expensive, about $1,800, a princely sum for a population that lives on less than $1 a day. There you go. In order to afford treatment, UNICEF says, some parents sell their children to work in the convents until the debt is paid off, a practice that can take months or even years. If they are unable to pay their debts, the children are forcibly taken from them, explains Bernard. UNICEF is one of several NGOs that have become concerned in recent years with the practices carried out inside Benin's traditional voodoo convents. The exact number of convents in the country is unknown, but as of 2014, UNICEF has identified 432 in 5 out of Benin's 77 municipalities. In some cases, a voodoo god will be assigned to a child and symbolic scars will be carved into the skin. Oof. Madeline, 10, another child that Plan International interviewed, recalls the scarification she received as part of her treatment. It was very painful and there was so much blood. It was everywhere. According to the charity, children as young as 2 years old can be kept in these convents, 2 or 1 as we saw from Channel 4, where access to education and healthcare is minimal. These children have to give up their names, learn a new language, that of voodoo, and begin an entirely new life, so their identity is erased. Again, the complete erasure of personal autonomy. In some instances, when the initiated are finally released, sometimes up to a decade after they arrived, they no longer have families to return to. Both Plan International and UNICEF have been holding talks with community leaders to limit the confinement periods spent inside these convents and provide the children inside with greater access to education. In 2015, both organizations met with Vodou chiefs, local authorities, and political figures to raise awareness about child rights within the convents. Okay. Next. What do we got here? All right, here we go. That hate group tracked by the Southern Poverty Law Center, the United States Human Rights Office of the High Commission, United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, OHCHR Expert Consultation from Geneva, Switzerland. Here we go. This is 2022. Research revealed that witchcraft and customary practices had been used by human trafficking networks in certain regions, namely through witchcraft accusations and juju oaths to lure women into trafficking networks. These practices create a psychological hold on victims, preventing them. By the way, this is not just going to be about human trafficking. Once we're through this section, there's some crazy stuff in addition. HPAWR, harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, manifest themselves in various forms, including violent attacks or ritual killings to procure body parts for ritual purposes. A third category manifests through juju rituals that are used to coerce a person into trafficking, ensuring their obedience and preventing them from seeking help. These practices are exacerbated by conflict, humanitarian crises, and displacement. Witchcraft-related harmful practices involve the breach of international human rights obligations, notably regarding human trafficking, violence against women, and the duty of due diligence. Various forms of violence and human rights violations can be associated with HPAWR, including killings, mutilation, coercion and trafficking of persons, torture, and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. All right, UN Human Rights Commission. All right. Now, you may have said, well, those are all Western sources, so aren't they all imperialist and neo-colonialist and covering for their own history of abuses and exploitation of the third world and predatory monetary lending and all of that? Well, let's say they are. Well, here we go. Here's some African investigative journalists. So you can take up your racism claims, but that's not the true voodoo. You can take this up with them. So this is Luz E. Nagel, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, Balaji Owasanoi, forgive me if I mispronounced it, Balaji Owasanoi. Fearing the dark, the use of witchcraft to control human trafficking victims and sustain vulnerability, from Southwestern Law Review. Oh, actually, this is a collaboration between Professor of Law, Stetson University of College of Law in Florida, and Professor at the second author, Balaji Owasanoi, is Professor, Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and Executive Director, Human Development Initiatives, Lagos, Nigeria. So if you want to mouth off about but, take it up with the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies and Executive Director, Human Development Initiatives, Lagos, Nigeria. And what do they say? Let's find out. The use of cultural superstitions and occult rituals is a powerful means to control a human trafficking victim and reaches to the depths of one's psychological vulnerability. Combined with other conditions that render a person vulnerable to being trafficked, such as poverty, lack of opportunity, and violent conflict, an individual can become so frightened by the omnipotent powers of the spirit world as to be rendered entirely incapable of resisting human acts and human rights violations. Invoking witchcraft to assert control and coercion is so insidious in many cultures that even once victims have... By the way, I'll save that for later. That even once victims have been identified and removed from a trafficking situation by state authorities, there is no guarantee that this will provide sufficient protection for victims to cooperate. So what I was going to say is I will suggest, and I did suggest this if you remember at the beginning, that in a way these like, oh, you can't say this, like you're racist, I'm going to cancel you, like how dare you, that's not real voodoo, like, I'm disappointed in you, we're going to destroy your reputation online, all that. And by the way, if anyone tries that, you know why. Right. all of that is the same shit that these traffickers are doing. It's control and coercion by fear. Well, if I can't stand up to these motherfuckers, then what chance does one of these children have? So frankly, hate me all you want, but these people don't have a voice. Hate me all you want, but these people don't have a voice. They are enslaved, their autonomy is taken away, and they live in a world in which they are things, either to be used for sexual exploitation or murdered at adults' whim. So again, if that's the hill you want to die on, please get to it quickly. Serious domestic and international human trafficking originates from Nigeria, where women and children are trafficked into prostitution rings throughout Europe. In many cases, witchcraft and cult practices are used as a means to coerce, trick, terrorize, exploit, and control Nigerian trafficking victims. In Vodou rites, traffickers commit to pay all costs of the journey, while the women promise to repay the money, be respectful to the traffickers, and agree not to denounce the traffickers to the police. The relationship element makes the imposition of belief systems and voodoo oaths easy, believable, and even readily accepted, particularly if the agents of trafficking present themselves as successful and have been accepted as such within the communities that place a premium value on wealth and emigration to a better place, regardless of means. All right, what do we got next? So this is UN again. This is a UN resolution. Oh my God, the hate groups. The UN resolution on the elimination of harmful practices and the protection of human rights by mothers impacted by albinism. Okay, this is slightly tangent, but not totally. So this is by Western and African authors. A recent United Nations UN resolution, the elimination of harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, was passed at the 47th session of the UN Human Rights Council, June 21st to July 13th, 2021. So there have been UN resolutions passed on this, assholes. I'm not talking to the people on the chat. I'm talking about these people who want to throw tantrums and make this all about them and spray their diarrhea at the walls online. Somehow I'm being racist to them. The resolution states that harmful practices related to witchcraft accusation and ritual attacks globally have resulted in various forms of violence, including killings, mutilation, burning, coercion and trafficking of persons, torture, and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment and stigmatization. By focusing on harmful practices, the resolution sidesteps, to some extent, the loaded construct of the term witchcraft and the associated challenges of academic and policy responses. Disciplinary scholarship, including anthropology, literature, legal studies, and health studies, diversely defines witchcraft, but there is a shared understanding that tends toward the belief in and use of supernatural or magical powers to achieve good or bad outcomes. With its foregrounding of harmful practices, the resolution achieves a balance between the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion on the one hand, and the limits to manifestation of these freedoms in order to protect the fundamental rights and freedoms of others on the other hand. In relation to health, witchcraft and witchcraft accusations have been associated with conditions such as epilepsy, dementia, and psychosis as exemplars of where cultural beliefs and practices carry profound impact. So check that out. So people were asking, are these real? I said supernaturally no, but psychologically as a placebo effect, if people believe in them, which I do not. If people believe in them, they can be profoundly psychologically affecting to them. So to the point where witchcraft and witchcraft accusations have been associated with epilepsy, dementia, and psychosis as exemplars of where cultural beliefs and practices carry profound impact. Persons with albinism, especially in some areas of Africa, have faced atrocious violations of their human rights with abandonment, threats, mutilations, and murder, purportedly for ritual practices and economic gain. All right, but if you don't believe those 18 sources, here's more. And again, African authors. May Aikiora. The role of, 2016 Journal of International Women's Studies. 2016, the role of African traditional religion and juju in human trafficking, implications for anti-trafficking, May Aikiora. All right. Elements within African traditional religion, or the ATRs, as Western occultists call them, popularly and often wrongfully termed juju, proffer a method of control often used by certain traffickers to keep their victims in perpetual bondage. The data used in this article was derived from extensive fieldwork in Nigeria and the United Kingdom, where 46 anti-trafficking stakeholders, including victims, were interviewed. The data indicates that this control mechanism was present in several cases of human trafficking from Nigeria, serving to impede effective investigations and the prosecution of traffickers. This form of control hinders the protection, prosecution, and prevention of trafficking due to the limited knowledge of law enforcement authorities and relevant anti-trafficking practitioners in dealing with the peculiarities of cases within this particular context. In a recent case, occurring in the United Kingdom in 2012, a Nigerian, Osazua Osalasi, and again, I apologize for the pronunciations, was convicted in the Canterbury Crown Court in the UK for inter alia trafficking of 2 young Nigerian orphan girls for sexual exploitation. The victims were raped, sexually abused, and subjected to an oath-taking ritual to control them as victims of trafficking. It was reported that Osalasi told the teenage girls that they would die or never bear children if they tried to escape or reveal what had happened to them. Imagine the fear of being a child in that situation. Your world would consist of nothing but fear. But hey, go die on that hill, kids. All right, La Strada International. By the way, I want to point out that if this is disturbing you, as it should, there are multiple human trafficking organizations, including this one, La Strada International, both Western and one in Nigeria. This one is European. I like Polaris, which is American, and then there's one that's Nigerian that specifically focus on this issue, or ones like it. So you are welcome to make a donation to them. I'm sure it does help, particularly the Nigerian one. All right, so this is actually a very famous journalist who I recommend looking up. He gets a ton of hate in Nigeria, but he's considered, I think, one of the best, if not the best, investigative journalists in Africa. So Misakilu Mojid, again, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Check his stuff out. I posted his stuff on Blue Sky. I think he's constantly under threat of imprisonment or death. All right, so 2008. Nigeria, voodoo aids human trafficking. So here we go. Here's people in Nigeria, African journalists, saying that voodoo is part of human trafficking. Oh, but no true Scotsman. Okay. Most of those contacted in the course of this investigation were unanimous that human trafficking has continued to thrive in Nigeria because of collusion among security, immigration, embassy, and airline officials and traffickers. Oof. It's like the whole country. These officials often take bribes in exchange for facilitating smooth passage across the borders for traffickers and their victims. Another major factor oiling the wheel of trafficking in the country is voodoo. So take it up with Nigerian investigative journalists. Insiders in the trafficking business say once arrangements for victims' trips abroad are completed, traffickers seal the deal by taking the victims to shrines of voodoo priests for oath-taking. There, victims are made to swear that they would never reveal the identities of their traffickers to anyone if arrested, whether in the course of the journey or in the destination countries. All right, we're almost through this part, and then we're going to get to the even worse stuff. So hang with me for just a second here as we bring this point home. All right. So this is from the Journal of Human Trafficking. Again, all this stuff is peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed. So, okay, here's the actual report. So Routledge, one of the most famous academic publishers in the world, Journal of Human Trafficking, as peer-reviewed as it gets, including by African academics. Rituals as a control mechanism in human trafficking, systematic review and thematic synthesis of qualitative literature by Amy Chisholm, Isabel Mark, Silvana Unigwe, and Cornelius Katona. Again, hope those are right. Spiritual rituals have potential for misuse, this is the abstract, as a form of control in human trafficking. A lack of understanding of this process can lead to challenges in supporting trafficking survivors. The fear arising after oath-taking can limit victims' ability to disclose information about their traffickers, causing challenges for authorities responsible for investigating and preventing trafficking crimes. The use of juju rituals in a trafficking context is not accepted in Edo State, Nigeria. This is demonstrated by the revocation in 2018 of all juju oaths by the Oba of Benin. Okay, well, that's a positive sign. The trafficking process involves, at least they're doing that for plausible deniability on the surface. The trafficking process involves professional and established networks. There are professional/business-like structures and transactions linking the traffickers and those administering rituals, such as traffickers purposefully requesting collaboration with juju administrators due to awareness of their power and control. Victims might not leave trafficking due to having sworn an oath not to do so, having an ongoing indebtedness and perceiving risk to themselves. Professionals have repeatedly observed that trafficking survivors returned to exploitation after escaping. Practitioners may struggle to understand or to maintain an open mind about the power that taking an oath might have over someone in terms of their actual ability to extricate themselves from a situation. A case study of the trafficking survivor stated she remembers the juju ritual and the contract. She remembers it as if it were yesterday because she is terrified of it. She says that it works, that it is real. Juju will kill you if you don't obey, she says. It has many ways to kill. It enters your body, makes you sick, and you die. She says white people can't understand it, but she has seen the things that juju can do, and she would never break the contract. By the way, this is what Europe used to be like before the coming of science and rationality, so magic ain't all good. Oh, okay, so what do we got here? Okay, so again, United Nations, that SPLC-tracked hate group, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So we've got I think we've quoted something like 4 to 5, maybe a little bit less than that, but multiple UN agencies. Different agencies working on the same problem. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, measures to combat trafficking in human beings in Benin, Nigeria, and Togo, 2006. A practice found in Nigeria, and more specifically in Benin City, Edo State, yet not reported in the other studies, is the use of juju or voodoo practices to bind victims to their traffickers, thus preventing the victims from cooperating with the police. An older woman or madam who facilitates the contact between the girls and the organization preparing the migration may recruit girls and women. The women enter into a contract to repay the cost of their trip. Damn, this contract varies from US $35,000 to US $55,000. Now remember, this is a country where people live on less than $1 a day. When traffickers draw up a contract, they often call on a traditional priest to give approval. This is usually done at a traditional shrine. The priest takes something deeply personal from the girl. It might be hair from her head, some pubic hair, a nail clipping, or some underwear. This trophy, this is like serial killer nonsense, this trophy is wrapped up with a flourish, and the priest leaves no doubt that it will be used to control the victim from a distance. This use of voodoo is a way of keeping the girl in bondage because it plays on her deepest superstitions. All right, yet another UN agency. Again, IOM, UN Migration, Office of UN Migration, so take it up with them. And again, this is an African author. Wait, I think I got this wrong, actually. Oh, yes, okay. All right, this is not an African author, that's the next one. So UN Migration. Loveth is among thousands of Nigerian girls vulnerable to human trafficking and sexual exploitation around Mali's artisanal gold mining areas. Yeah, so again, if you support sending children as slaves into mines, go ahead and die on this hill. First-hand accounts from IOM staff who met them reveal that many of them are underage and were deceived into traveling to Mali, either under false promises of a regular job or the conviction that they were heading to Europe. Oops. Bondage is a common method used by traffickers to coerce their victims and exercise control over them. As in Loveth's case, it can be debt bondage, but it can also be the confiscation of travel documents or voodoo cursing, or in this case, victims of trafficking are coerced into signing a moral contract with the traffickers who finance their journey. The contract is sealed by a spiritual priest or native doctor to whom they promise never to denounce their traffickers to the police to obey their madam, and to fully pay their debt. The victims thus live in constant fear of reprisals, including their death or that of their family, if they fail. For those arriving in Italy, their debt can reach 50,000 euros. Yeah, wait till we get to the Western Hemisphere, because it gets even worse, if that's possible. All right, next up. I believe this is an African academic journal. Okay, so here we got, Brave Browser recommended. So, again with the pronunciation. So, Oluwatosin Ogwezi in the Agora International Journal of Juridical Sciences, peer-reviewed, Voodoo and human trafficking in Nigeria as impediments to effective administration of justice. This is 2022. Voodoo is the major factor. So again, African academic, it's spelled out as clearly as you need. Voodoo is the major factor that makes human trafficking to thrive in Nigeria. Right here. Voodoo is the major factor that makes human trafficking to thrive in Nigeria. Voodoo is regularly used by traffickers in human trafficking to exert pressure over the victims. The use of voodoo is a form of mental coercion aimed at reducing the need to use physical violence. The adverse power exerted over the trafficked victims is so enormous that they dare not disobey the trafficker. In this manner, the Nigerian networks can control their victim from a distance, and no additional person is required to supervise them. This paper concludes that the use of voodoo by traffickers impedes effective administration of justice. Voodoo does not allow victims of human trafficking to reveal the identities of the trafficker so that the law enforcement agencies would not arrest and prosecute them. So again, here's more African academics lamenting this. Peter Enyebe from the Journal of Social Welfare and Human Rights, 2015, peer-reviewed. Trafficking in persons involves a forceful and deceitful acquisition, sale, and resale of persons, especially women and young girls. The focus of this paper is on voodoo and human trafficking of women and young girls for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation from Nigeria to the outside world. African academic, the work finds voodoo is a major oiling wheel of trafficking in women and girls in Nigeria for sexual exploitation. So bring me your no true Scotsman there. The work further found that various reasons, ranging from flimsy to serious ones, contribute to the trafficking in women and young girls for sexual exploitation. Another disclosure is that in the process of the victims' desperateness to migrate, the traffickers dragged them to voodoo shrines where voodoo rituals are used to coerce them into working for their sponsors. They are then by the way, I spent extra time on voodoo in Africa because I was expecting the no true Scotsman argument of, well, that's not the real voodoo. Well, this is literally the real voodoo in Africa prior to any migration to the Western Hemisphere that we're talking about. Before syncretization with Catholicism, so you can't blame Catholicism. All of this, okay? They are then transported to an often fatal journey through a number... Like, how is this different from the Middle Passage? On an often fatal journey through a number of West African countries until they reach their departure where they are sold to their madams. It is a fact also that belief in voodoo is very strong in some parts of Nigeria, and the women are often forced to make an oath by one of the voodoo priests, in which they swear obedience to their traffickers. The paper recommends, among others, okay, so get ready for this incredible white supremacy from Peter Enyebe. The paper recommends, among others, that there must be mass anti-voodoo education in order to effectively disabuse people's minds about the myths of voodoo. The paper concludes, among others, that trafficking in persons is a global problem for both sending and receiving countries. So to the person who said, but my Europeans, it is a global problem for both sending and receiving countries, and it is evil, inhuman, and against the law. And investigators handling cases involving voodoo oaths should try new methods to get victims' cooperation for them to speak out. In spite of the fact that trafficking in persons is a crime, it has become a global business that affects almost every country and reaps enormous profits for traffickers and their criminal intermediaries. It has become a burden on various governments in Nigeria that has defied all legislations. Musakilu Mojid, so this is this awesome journalist that I mentioned earlier, a journalist for the Nigerian online newspaper 234next.com, has written about voodoo and human trafficking. Said voodoo, known in Nigeria as juju, was a fairly common tool of intimidation used by traffickers. The victims are very scared of the power of voodoo, so traffickers tell them that if they do anything funny, they will invoke voodoo. They fear death, illness, any misfortune the priest tells them. Therefore, if the voodoo priest tells the victims that they will get smallpox, then they will believe they will catch smallpox. The power of belief is a truly awe-inspiring or terrifying thing, depending on how it's used. Okay. More African academics. More peer-reviewed. All right. Whew, that font usage. E. Wilmot Harrop. Africa, a bewitching... Wait a minute, this is the wrong one. Sorry. Okay. So our authors here are Abado Abraham Lubin, Associate Professor Enoch Terlumen, Turna Vincent Tavershima Ayertium. That sounds like Eastern European. I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, so this is Bradford, UK, Department of Peace Studies and International Development, University of Bradford, UK, Department of Geography and Environment and Sustainability in University in Sierra Leone, and Department of Political Science, Federal University, Kasher Gombe State, Nigeria. All right, 2021, very recent. Another worrisome dimension in human trafficking in Africa is the use of fetish/witchcraft called juju in Nigeria, for instance, by the traffickers on their victims. It is aimed at putting maximum fear and control on the victim. For the traffickers, it is aimed at putting, These are made possible through the taking of oaths of faithfulness and allegiance to the traffickers, who are mostly referred to as master or madam. On the other hand, victims undergo the ritual with the belief of gaining a spiritual protection against any harm and danger in a strange land. In Nigeria, the issue became so embarrassing for the government. In Nigeria, the issue became so embarrassing for the government and the Edo tribe, where the practice is known to be more notorious, such that the king of Edo people, Oba Iware II, I'm going to guess, on the 18th of March 2018, cursed anyone under his kingdom who administers any oath or witchcraft on anyone. So they're dealing with this by putting curses on people for putting curses. This is going to go well. To facilitate human trafficking. Okay. How about arresting them? The role of African traditional religion and juju in human trafficking, implications for anti-trafficking. The practice is deeply rooted in fear and control mechanisms. It baffles me. Just like, it's just like, occult people who claim to be for the liberation of human consciousness and their own personal liberation now run to one of the worst forms of slavery on earth. Real dumb. Critics argue that the use of juju ritual serves as a psychological tool to ensure obedience and submission of the victims, often leading to severe mental and emotional trauma. Victims often believe that the ritual provides them with protection, but in reality, it binds them to their traffickers through fear. These rituals are reported to have long-lasting psychological effects, causing victims to feel trapped and powerless, unable to escape from their traffickers. Okay. So this is again from Africa, African journalists. This is from allafrica.com, African news source. E. Wilmot Harrop, 2012. Through ritual oaths of protection, witchcraft provides a convenient way to traffic and mentally dominate victims. Disobedience will be punished by the spiritual world. The strong belief in the spirits makes this an easy tool for modern slave traders. So again, go die on that hill, kids. Modern slave traders. One 14-year-old Nigerian victim was taken to a juju priest to undergo a ritual. Once in the UK, it became clear she was to be a sex slave. The deeply held... So yeah, they're real unhappy about this in Africa. They're real unhappy about it. Any good people there, as you might imagine. And again, it's a problem for both the providing and the receiving parties. Once in the UK, it became clear she was to be a sex slave. The deeply held spiritual beliefs which facilitate the Juju oath cause huge problems for law enforcement officials who want victims to testify. Okay, now when I said they really hate this in Africa, any good people, here's people actually talking about, here's an African, okay, this is from a book, okay, so check this out. Culture Matters, How Values Shape Human Progress. This is a anthology. This is, I believe, from University of Chicago. And there's an article in it by an African academic named Daniel Atunga Manguel. Does Africa need a cultural adjustment program? So that's in this book. So this is 2000. So here you have, what the hell? Yeah, here you have African intellectuals lamenting the effect of this on Africa. They're saying it's a problem. Maybe you should believe them. Maybe you should believe them instead of running to the, but this, but that, but my racism, but I'm so disappointed in you, Jason. Don't blame me. Take it up with every single one of these academics and journalists and law enforcement officials. Okay, Daniel Atunga Manguel. Does Africa need a cultural adjustment program? The indicators of Africa's plight are staggering. Life expectancy is below 60 years in 28 countries, below 50 years in 18 countries, and in Sierra Leone, just 37 years. About half of, they're almost at Europe levels there, Glasgow. About half of the more than 600 million people south of the Sahara live in poverty. Half or more of the adult populations of at least 13 countries are illiterate, and half or more of women are illiterate in at least 18 countries. Children under 5 die at rates in excess of 100 per 1,000 in at least 28 countries. 1% infant mortality is insane. In Sierra Leone, 1% is a lot. In Sierra Leone, the rate is 335 per 1,000. So for those playing the home game, that is a full 1/3 infant mortality. 33.5%. 1/3 infant mortality with an adult life expectancy of 37. A lot of that is war, but also poverty, and those two things are obviously connected. The population growth rate is 2.7% annually, almost 4 times the rate in high-income countries. Among countries supplying such data to the World Bank, some of the most inequitable income distribution patterns are found in Africa, with the most affluent 10% accounting for about 47% of income in Kenya, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, and about 43% in Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, and Sierra Leone. Democratic institutions are commonly weak or non-existent throughout Africa. We can no longer reasonably... Okay, here we are. We can no longer reasonably blame the colonial powers for our condition. Several decades have passed during which we have been in substantial control of our own destiny. Yet, today, Africa is more dependent than ever on rich countries, more vulnerable than any other continent to maneuvers aimed at giving with one hand and taking back with the other. The World Bank, usually a great source of funds and advice, is itself short of ideas. Other than structural adjustment programs whose efficiency has not yet been proven, there is silence. The need to question our culture, the African culture, is evident. So don't get mad at me. Get mad at Daniel Atunga Manguel, a very famous academic from Africa. The African, returning to the roots of religion, believes that only God can modify the logic of a world created for eternity. The world and our behavior are an immutable given, bequeathed in a mythical past to our founding ancestors, whose wisdom continues to illuminate our life principles. The African remains enslaved by his environment. Nature is his master and sets his destiny. African culture is not easily grasped. It refuses to be packaged and resists attempts at systemization. Yeah, and I would say, like, Africa is kind of the future for occult research too, by the way. I mean, like, it is a vast continent that has been despoiled by Europe with next to no regard whatsoever for its cultural traditions, of which there are hundreds, if not thousands, of which Vodon is only one, right? But here, he's even stronger, and I'll show you this in the original text just to make the point. A society in which magic and witchcraft flourish today is a sick society ruled by tension, fear, and moral disorder. So this is not an occult writer. This is an academic, an economist, an academic in the realm of economy, or economist. Sorcery is a costly mechanism for managing conflict and preserving the status quo, which is importantly what African culture is about. Therefore, is not witchcraft a mirror reflecting the state of our societies? Witchcraft is both an instrument of social coercion. It helps maintain and perhaps even increase the loyalty of individuals toward the clan, and a very convenient political instrument to eliminate any opposition that might appear. Yeah, here too, when it's done wrong, as opposed to when it's done right, which is for individual liberation, not control of others. And I say that in every single time that I mention it. Or I'm teaching it, rather. Witchcraft is for us a psychological refuge in which all our ignorance finds its answers and our wildest fantasies become realities. In the final analysis, if Africans immerse themselves in the present and demonstrate a lack of concern for tomorrow, it is less because of the safety of community social structures that envelop them than because of their submission to the ubiquitous and implacable divine will. Africans have always had their own time, and they have often been criticized for it. In traditional African society, which exalts the glorious past of ancestors through tales and fables, nothing is done to prepare for the future. The African, anchored in his ancestral culture, is so convinced that the past can only repeat itself that he worries only superficially about the future. However, without a dynamic perception of the future, there is no planning, no foresight, no scenario building. In other words, no policy to affect the course of events. There can be no singing of tomorrows so long as our culture does not teach us to question the future, to repeat it mentally, and to bend it to our will. So here we go. So here's a much more advanced understanding of magic. Bend it to our will by using the instruments of the real world, not superstition, right? So again, don't get mad at me. It's an African economist. All right. So check this out. So this is a U.S. Senate subcommittee hearing. And there's a whole video on this, okay? So this was, and a bunch of people from Africa, for instance, Obed Bayamugishi, the program advisor for the Kyampisi Child Care Ministries, were involved in this in basically going to Washington to the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee in 2023 to address ritual abuse and sacrifice in Africa. So they were in the U.S. saying this is a problem. Okay, so you can watch the video if you go there. Here's the gist. So after all these testimonies by people like Mr. Bayamugisha, the chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Middle East and the Senate Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee, who is Chairman Chris Smith, who's a senator from New Jersey, had the following remarks. These are some of his remarks. These horrific crimes are at times trivialized or falsely portrayed as myth, rumors, or misinformation, but they are very real. Okay, so this is of the record from the U.S. Senate. Crimes of ritual abuse and sacrifice involve mutilating and usually murdering, remember, these people give their oath under testimony, victims to remove certain body parts, bodily fluids, or organs for use in sadistic rituals. Much of this abuse happens while the victim is still alive and without anesthesia, and many die afterwards from shock, pain, or blood loss. In sub-Saharan Africa, we know that these crimes are especially prevalent around election seasons, when many children and adults go missing never to be found, or to be found dead with body parts missing. This is because, to this day, some politicians use such rituals to gain power. We're not going to mention the Clintons here, although there are rumors. Tragically, children and women are especially vulnerable to this abuse and are particularly sought after by perpetrators. Albino people, particularly albino children, are at very high risk for being kidnapped, trafficked, and abused for the sake of certain rituals. In Africa, it is estimated that hundreds of thousands of children each year, hundreds of thousands, are victims of ritual attacks in some form. It is absolutely unacceptable that these crimes continue to occur, affecting so many vulnerable children and robbing them of their futures. And it is deeply disturbing that cases continue to be underreported and inadequately addressed by law enforcement. Furthermore, ritual abuse and sacrifice is an especially pernicious form of human trafficking that often involves trafficking of organs. Organ trafficking for use in rituals is a worldwide phenomenon. Traffickers even go so far as to set up warehouses to sell human flesh. Again, Senate Subcommittee on Middle East and North Africa, under record, under oath, in response to on record, under oath testimonies from people from Africa. Organ trafficking for use in rituals is a worldwide phenomenon. Traffickers even go so far as to set up warehouses to sell human flesh. We must do more in our anti-trafficking efforts to specifically address these heinous crimes. Whew. Okay, that's Africa. Now Haiti. Let me check in on the chat real quick. Oh, man. We got more chats. Okay, we got more super chats. Awesome. 4 more, and I will make a much more lighthearted video on my favorite occult videos. Okay. Oh, Joe, here we go. Truth to power. This is the level to which people will dodge is phenomenal. You are citing an African source by Africans who have embraced Islam and Christianity. How dare they? First of all, that's probably not. We're talking about African investigative journalists, asshole, and NGOs, okay, and people testifying at the Senate. So no. And it's like, so what if they embrace Islam or Christianity? Also, it's just like, no, that's not the case either. Like the lengths to which people will go to dodge. Just let him go. Let him go. He'll keep getting funnier and funnier. Vox says just did a react vid on a random kung fu flick, and the hero ended up being a sex trafficker. It's everywhere. Yeah, it is everywhere. It's certainly not constrained to voodoo. Vampire. I mean, it's crazy that people will defend disgusting shit because they once liked the person or practice involved. Yeah. I mean, that's what these so-called voodoo occult people in the West are doing. It's like, well, my friend did it. My other white friend did it, and he was cool. So what's the problem? It's like, yeah, this is how people cover for sexual abusers that are their friends as well. Anyone who's ever witnessed that dynamic firsthand knows exactly what I'm talking about. Whereas someone told me recently there's, at least for men, there's 3 types of men in the world. There's abusers, there's people who call out the abuse, and then there's people who look the other way or dismiss it. And in many ways, the third group, which includes many of the people, some of the people I've mentioned on this stream that you know about, is the worst in some ways. Brandon, the world is a disgusting place. People are worse. Unfortunately, yes. It's beautiful too, but if you don't look at the horrors, you just have your head in the sand. And the horrors make the beauty that much easier to appreciate, you know. Another super chat from Desert Dweller. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. And from Sus Rando, thank you for shining a flashlight in the darkness, OG. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. Kai says, hell of a time to tune in mid-gym. Here's to the lighthearted video. Yeah. 3 more super chats and we'll get there. All right. Okay, truth to power is just insane. And it's talking about poodoo versus... Okay, you're just a troll. All right, I'm just going to block you from the channel. You're on timeout for 24 hours. Bye. Bye. Oh, was, no, yay. is probably 5 syllables. So o wa sa no ye. Okay. Hopefully that's right. Vox says getting canceled is good for you now. Chug, chug, chug. So Jay says, why you keep bringing up racism? No, nobody's calling me racist in the thread. It's just that like people have been calling me racist for 30 years for bringing this up in ways that have deeply affected my career because they just don't want attention drawn to themselves. That's what I'm talking about. JSAP, yes, but are you claiming the healing is real? Not really, outside of psychological placebo effect. Simon says there's a very tragic documentary on people born as albinos in Africa. I think it was Channel 4. Life is short and cruel for those affected. Yeah. Oh, got another super chat. Thank you. Panning Gaz, $5 for lighthearted pallets cleaner. Yeah. We're going to need that after this. JSAP says we can't see what you're reading and just stays at the top of the page. Well, I'm reading my summary, right? I'm not, instead of reading the whole article, I'm just reading the things that I pulled out. So if you want to see exactly what I'm reading from, go to endvoodootrafficking.org, which is where all of the summaries of these articles. I've basically pulled out the key bits of these articles rather than reading the whole thing. So I'm pulling up the image of the article so that you can see what it is. You can see the source and that it's vetted, but I'm reading my clipped out summaries. So the links are all there if you want to read the whole articles, and go to endvoodootrafficking.org if you came in late, just to explain that. I can see how that would cause confusion. 830 Wolf says, I think there would be more uproar and focus on this if we in the West could begin to even comprehend how much spells can ingrain itself into the psyche and cause fear. Our culture has been there. So this is a big blind spot in the West that could sink us. And it's simply that because the majority of the West became secular and now discounts the power of belief, for some reason we think that applies to everyone else. Whereas for the reality for most of the world is that belief, and religious belief specifically, drives what the majority of the people on the planet do. And the religion they follow matters. They're not all universal. They are all very specific sets of instructions, just street level. Islam is a set of instructions. It's a piece of computer code. So is Christianity. So are all of them. So is, Vodon, right? Although it's not a textual religion. In this case, it just seems to be a system of intergenerational abuse. So because we discount the power of belief, consider this. 9/11 was done with a box cutter and the power of belief. So we can have all the supposed sophistication and technology in the world. It just makes us stupider and more vulnerable because we're not willing to meet the world on its own terms. So this is, again, why I do what I do. And I, of course, offer my services to anyone who wants to talk to me about this for a better understanding of how these practices affect me in terms of law enforcement, government, or NGOs. I would be happy to work with anybody who wanted to work with me because it is important. Okay. Fox says, love to Jason in chat. Don't get kidnapped. Peace, y'all. Peace out. Okay, so we're talking about it matters where you are. So SB says you should consider using a different way to donate because YouTube takes a significant slice of super chats. Stream Elements and Streamlabs is way better, and you can donate with PayPal. Thank you, SB. I'll take a look at that. So, oops. That is much appreciated. I am totally new to this. So yeah, if anyone has tips on, people were saying they have their own YouTube. So if anybody has tips on how to YouTube better, let me know. I'm going to copy that and paste it so I can look into it. Streamlabs. Okay, cool. All right. You can, of course, always sign up for courses at magic.me. For instance, the Adept Initiative, which is about to start on Monday. Okay. Oluwatosin Ogwezi. Okay, thank you. Oluwatosin Ogwezi. 830 Wolf. I don't think people realize that in Europe, the stereotypical image of a voodoo doll with pins into a wax doll. This was also practiced here in the Middle Ages. Yeah, and we got over it, and other parts of the world haven't. Matthew says, respectfully, can the same be said of the Catholic Church? Just curious. There are absolutely PDF files networks in the Catholic Church. This is now a matter of public record. There are PDF file networks everywhere, so it's certainly not constrained to voodoo. And I mentioned this at the beginning of, and it's on the beginning of this page. But this is a different issue. So it's important not to conflate issues because they're completely different sets of circumstances and groups of people. But of course, Vodon, we're about to get to the Western Hemisphere, where Vodon now becomes half Catholic. So what's the effect of that? I don't know, but it's worth noting. Eddie Bernays says, if it's in your head, you can make it real. Yeah. Max says, what's with all the whataboutism in the chat? Mentioning the misdeeds of members of one group does not automatically come with a tacit acceptance of similar behavior in other groups. Yeah. So I guess I called them on the No True Scotsman. So now they're doing whataboutism. But what about? But what about? But what about? So what about that? That's bad too. This is bad. That's bad. Multiple things can be bad. Okay. One thing at a time. Simon says pure evil. That's right. Matthew says, I'm grateful for Jason bringing attention to this topic, and by no means am I dismissing the horrific abuse. Yeah, Simon says hell on earth. Yeah. Yeah. So I just banned this truth to poof guy. Truth to poof. Yeah. I don't even know what he was saying. Okay. I don't want that person wasting everyone's time. You guys want to get onto the info. Okay, here we go. We are on to the Western Hemisphere. I'm actually going to take a 90-second break, or slightly more bathroom break, and we'll be right back, and then we will continue with this harrowing stream. All right. So I know a lot of that was a little repetitive about the Nigerian human trafficking networks and oaths and coercions and contracts and all that. I know a lot of that was repetitive, but I'm doing that to drive it home and to show all the authoritative sources, from the U.S. State Department to the U.S. Senate to Europol to African NGOs to, on and on and on, BBC, CNN, on and on and on and on, academic journals, international human trafficking NGOs, all that, to just show that they're all these authoritative sources are saying the same thing, right? So you can't claim that this is made up. All right, but now let's move on to what fresh hell awaits us in Haiti. What fresh hell? Let's find out. All right, voodoo as a tool of political and biochemical terror in Haiti. I hope you have strong stomachs. So first of all, let's talk about... Why is that not loading? Let's talk about the Tonton Macoute, which for some reason is not loading. What? Okay, we'll pull it up in a second. So check out the Wikipedia for the Tonton Macoute. And the following is my words. These are my words, okay? To introduce the Haiti section. Western voodoo apologists, of who we've had some on this stream, often like to cite the tradition's role in the Toussaint Louverture. Again, what an odd last name. He liberated Haiti. What an odd last name. Toussaint Louverture led 1791 Haitian Revolution. They conveniently leave out that voodoo has also been used as a tool. Okay, let me restart this because this is critical to understanding where Western leftists are coming from on this issue. Western voodoo apologists, who are all leftists, often like to cite the tradition's role in the Toussaint Louverture-led 1791 Haitian Revolution. They love that because it was the only successful rebellion against the United States. And it was the only successful slave rebellion against the United States. Okay, that's great, but they conveniently leave out that voodoo has also been used as a tool of brutal paramilitary repression in post-revolt Haiti, and not at the hands of Western powers, but by local strongmen, particularly the infamous Papa Doc Duvalier. Let's pull up a picture of this guy. Oh, okay, so there's Papa Doc Duvalier. Let's see if they have him as Baron Samedi. I'm not sure they have a picture of that. But yeah, he used to dress up as Baron Samedi. Okay, so Papa Doc and his son Baby Doc, who were the dictators of the U.S.-backed, actually, dictators of Haiti starting in the 50s. Okay. And not at the hands of Western powers, but by local strongmen, particularly the infamous Papa Doc Duvalier, who styled himself as Baron Samedi to terrorize his citizens and employed a voodoo-themed secret police force to do so. So here's from Wikipedia. The Tonton Macoute, Haitian Creole Tonton Macoute, or simply the Macoute, was a Haitian paramilitary and secret police force created in 1959 by dictator Francois Papa Doc Duvalier. Haitians named this force after the Haitian mythological boogeyman Tonton Macoute, aka Uncle Gunny Sack, who kidnaps and punishes unruly children by snaring them in a gunny sack, Macoute, before carrying them off to be consumed for breakfast. The Macoute were known for their brutality, state terrorism, and assassinations. Duvalier authorized the Tonton Macoute to commit systematic violence, terrorism, and human rights abuses to suppress political opposition. So there's your voodoo freedom fighters. They were responsible for unknown numbers of murders and rapes in Haiti. Political opponents often disappeared overnight or were sometimes attacked in broad daylight. Tonton Macoute stoned and burned people alive. Many times so this was a paramilitary organization that was backed by the U.S. as well. So, oh wait, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. But it was Haiti. This was, or rather, I need to look into that. I think there was like some financial motivation to keep him there because he kept the population suppressed for Western corporations, but it's a little bit more complex than that. All right. Political opponents often disappeared. But anyways, my point being, it's like you're cheering on some of the worst forms of political oppression ever. Go figure. Well, they'd still support the Stasi and all that, probably. Political opponents often disappeared overnight or were sometimes attacked in broad daylight. Tonton Macoute stoned and burned people alive. Many times they put the corpses of their victims on display, often hung in trees for everyone to see and take as warnings against opposition. Family members who tried to remove the bodies for proper burial often disappeared. Anyone who challenged the VSN risked assassination. Their unrestrained state terrorism was accompanied by corruption, extortion, and personal aggrandizement among the leadership. The victims of Tonton Macoute could range from a woman in the poorest of neighborhoods who had previously supported an opposing politician to a businessman who refused to comply with extortion threats ostensibly taken as donations for public works, but which were in fact the source of profit for corrupt officials and even President Duvalier. So check it. The Tonton Macoute murdered between 30 and 60,000 Haitians. It's a lot of people. Never hear about that. When Francois Duvalier came to power in 1957, voodoo was becoming celebrated as authentic Haitian culture by intellectuals and the griots, after it had been dropped for years by those with education. The Tonton Macoute were strongly influenced by voodoo tradition and adopted denim uniforms resembling clothing like that of Azaka Made, the patron of farmers. They carried and used machetes in symbolic reference to Ogun, a great general in voodoo tradition. Some of the most important members of the Tonton Macoute were voodoo leaders. So before anyone gets into the No True Scotsman, some of the most important members of the Tonton Macoute were voodoo leaders. This religious affiliation gave the Tonton Macoute a kind of unearthly authority in the eyes of the public. From their methods to their choice of clothes, voodoo always played an important role in the paramilitary's actions. The Tonton Makut wore straw hats, blue denim shirts, and dark glasses, and were armed with machetes and guns. Both their allusions to the supernatural and their physical presentations were used to instill fear and respect among the common people, including any opposition actors. Their title of Tonton Makut was embedded in Haitian lore of a boogeyman who took children away in his sack, or Makut. Okay, here's more on Duvalier from the LA Times, 1986. LA Times. Yeah. Although voodoo practitioners, so this is Dan Williams, 1986, on location in Haiti. Although voodoo practitioners have won some credit for supporting demonstrations against the dictatorship, voodoo is also under attack for its connections with the Duvalier family, particularly the ousted president's father, the late President Francois Papadoc Duvalier. Vigilante campaigns against Duvalier officials and associates have spilled over into assaults on voodoo priests who in one way or another were linked to the regime. So here we've got competing factions, which is interesting. Reasons for the attacks vary. But I will point out there are, well, I need to do more research on that. Anyways, reasons for the attacks vary. Occasionally, ties to the Duvalier government are clear. For some priests, doubled as members of the Tonton Makut, Duvalier's feared network of armed enforcers and spies. In other cases, the motivation was personal vengeance, often based on belief in the occult power of voodoo to do harm. So So as soon as Duvalier was ousted, all these people revenge killed these voodoo priests. Interesting. A northern farmer complained that a sorcerer brought a relative back from the dead and turned him into a zombie doomed to eternal bondage under the priest. Guess what? That's real. I'm about to explain how that's real, and it's way worse. The reality of zombies is infinitely worse than whatever you think it is. That's real. We'll get to that. Voodoo came to be linked with the repression that characterized Duvalier's regime. The first chief of his private militia was a sorcerer from Gonaives. Duvalier once ordered the head of a rival cut off and shipped to the palace, where Duvalier is said to have chatted with the victim's spirit. To be fair, I sometimes want to do this with some of my critics online. But yes. All right, let's talk about zombies. Wade Davis, some of you may recognize him, very famous ethnobotanist, who made his name researching the use of botanicals in zombie making. Here we go. The Ethnobiology of the Haitian Zombie from the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, 1983. There was a very schlocky movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow with Bill Pullman that was based on his work, but it was completely fanciful. Okay, so this is my writing. And then I'll tell you when it goes into his report. So this is me. Zombies have long been associated with Haitian voodoo and have become a near constant fixture of popular culture. This is one case in which the reality is far worse than the myth. The Canadian ethnobotanist Wade Davis became internationally famous in the 1980s for his research into the zombie phenomenon, as described in his 1985 bestseller, The Serpent and the Rainbow. Davis's research into zombies revealed one of the cruelest treatments of a human being imaginable. And I've seen a lot of cruel shit. Davis's research into zombies revealed one of the cruelest treatments of a human being imaginable, rivaling even accounts of Nazi medical experimentation. Here, I'm going to pull this up so you can see this. A living individual is given a mixture of pufferfish toxin, which puts them in a state of suspended animation that can easily be mistaken for death, and potentially datura, among the most nightmarish psychotropics known to man, and then buried alive. Once exhumed, the individual is restored to partial consciousness, having sustained brain damage that removes their free will and turns them into a slave to be used for manual labor. Again, slavery in its purest form, the utter removal of personal autonomy to the point of inducing permanent brain damage to turn somebody into a brute. This unfathomably brutal practice is then used as a threat to keep other individuals terrified and compliant. Notably, critically, Davis traced, Davis traced the lineage of the Haitian secret societies that practiced this inhuman form of biological slavery to the same secret societies that organized the slave revolt that overthrew French rule. So when Western academic leftists are trumpeting the Haitian slave revolt as a symbol of peak anti-colonial resistance, which it may well be, they're completely leaving out that these same people went on to create or continue to use, perhaps depending on when this was created, presumably back in Africa, I don't know, one of the worst forms of slavery imaginable, if not the worst. I can't think of a worse one. I literally can't. And if you can, let me know, because I can't. Ironic, shall we say. The toxicology of the zombie powder is summarized by Davis in this study. Okay, so that's me. Now here is Davis from his article. Okay, Journal of Ethnopharmacology. For many years, students of Haitian society have suggested that there is an ethnopharmacological basis for the notorious zombies, the living dead of peasant folklore. The recent surfacing of 3 zombies, one of whom may represent the first potentially verifiable case, has focused scientific attention on the reported zombie drug. The formula of the poison was obtained at 4 widely separated localities in Haiti. The consistent ingredients include 1 or more species of pufferfish, Diodon hystrix, Diodon holocanthus, or Sphaeroides testudineus, which contain tetrodotoxins, potent neurotoxins fully capable of pharmacologically inducing the zombie state. The ingredients, preparation, and method of application are presented. The symptomology of tetrodotoxication, as described in the biomedical literature, is compared with the constellations of symptoms recorded from the zombies in Haiti. The cosmological rationale of zombies within the context of Vodou theology is described. Preliminary laboratory tests are summarized. So this is a world-famous study. World-famous. Okay. And let's close out some of these. Got like 18,000 tabs open. All right. All right. So further on the zombies, on the zombie question. So this is a Harvard magazine. Harvard wrote an article about Wade Davis's research 3 years later. And this, I think, actually was the article that the Bill Pullman movie was based on. All right. So Gino Del Guercio, The Secrets of Haiti's Living Dead. Harvard magazine. From the cover story, 1986. This is rough. Man, oh man. The night he was buried, he told Angelina, a voodoo priest raised him from the grave. He was beaten with a sisal whip and carried off to a sugar plantation in northern Haiti where, with other zombies, he was forced to work as a slave. Davis believes the secret societies are responsible for policing their communities, and the threat of zombification is one way they maintain order. Says Davis, zombification has a material basis, but it also has a societal logic. To the uninitiated, the practice may appear a random criminal activity, but in rural Vodon society, it is exactly the opposite. A sanction imposed by recognized authorities, a form of capital punishment. I'd rather be dead, quite frankly. For rural Haitians, zombification is an even more severe punishment than death, yeah, because it deprives the subject of his most valued possessions, his free will and independence. So there you go, Vodon, slavery in its purest form. The poison is rubbed into the victim's skin. Within hours, he begins to feel nauseated and has difficulty breathing. A pins and needles sensation afflicts his arms and legs, then progresses to the whole body. The subject becomes paralyzed. His lips turn blue for lack of oxygen. Quickly, sometimes within 6 hours, his metabolism is lowered to a level almost indistinguishable from death. The victim was buried, dug up within a few hours, and somehow reawakened. Sometimes the victim suffocates in the coffin before he can be resurrected. But clearly, the potion works well enough, often enough, to make zombies more than a figment of Haitian imagination. Davis thinks it possible that the psychological trauma of zombification may be augmented by datura or some other drug. And by the way, if you've never looked up datura, go look up datura trip reports on Erowid to understand how horrifying this is. He thinks zombies may be fed a datura paste that accentuates their disorientation. During the French occupation of the late 18th century, 370,000 African-born slaves were imported to Haiti criminally between 1780 and 1790. In 1791, the black population launched one of the few successful slave revolts in history, forming secret societies and overcoming first the French plantation owners and then a detachment of troops from Napoleon's army sent to quell the revolt. Very impressive. By any Vodon or not, very impressive. Davis's investigations uncovered the importance of the secret societies. These groups traced their origins to the bands of escaped slaves that organized the revolt against the French in the late 18th century. Open to both men and women, the societies control specific territories of the country. In rural areas, secret Vodun societies, much like those found on the west coast of Africa, are as much or more in control of everyday life as the Haitian government. So, are as much or more in control of everyday life as the Haitian government. So again, freedom fighters? No, they're even worse agents of control than the government. Davis believes the secret societies are responsible for policing their communities, and the threat of zombification is one way they maintain order. Whew. All right. Well, here we go. Again, taking a look at the political angle. So, foreign policy. This is about more recent events. 2021. Wilson Joseph, Baron Samedi, or Bawan Samedi, and the meaning of voodoo in Haitian politics. 2021. Foreignpolicy.com. While voodoo can be, this is me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. This is not me. This is foreign policy. While voodoo can be a source of spiritual refuge from gang violence for many Haitians, it is just as integral to the country's ongoing gang violence. One account follows, which also describes the interweaving of voodoo and gang violence with Haitian essentialism and racism. Okay, that part actually was me. Now this is foreign policy, sorry. In a video statement released on October 21st, that would have been 2021, Wilson Joseph, the leader of the 400 Mawozo gang, dressed up as Bawan Samedi, Baron Samedi, Voodoo's fearsome spirit of death, threatened to kill members of the Haitian government as well as 17 foreign hostages, including 5 children, in Haiti on a Christian mission trip. They remain his captives. Why did Joseph adopt Bawan's traits, beard, purple and black clothing, top hat, and silver cross, to make these threats? The answer reveals how voodoo and Christianity remain perpetually entangled with Haiti's power struggles and politics. In his emotional statement given in Creole, Joseph first noted that Prime Minister Ariel Henry, former Prime Minister Claude Joseph, and former police chief Leon Charles had not yet paid their debts. He invoked a spell in the name of Bawan and explained that he had wept over his 5 soldiers who were killed and whose open coffins he stood behind. Now the politicians will cry blood, he said, and vowed that he'd shoot those Americans, referring to the Christian missionaries, one of whom is Canadian, if his demands, including a $17 million ransom, were unmet. Joseph blamed the killings of his soldiers on the Haitian police and state, but he also seemed to view his killing of the missionaries as part and parcel of his revenge. More cynical are the words and deeds of the G9 militia leader, Jimmy Barbecue Cherezier. Yeah, let me find you a picture of this guy, because he walks around with a Legba shirt on. This guy's still at it, as far as I know. This is a former police officer and voodoo gang leader. Yeah, ready to operate there, buddy. Looks like a nice dude. Okay. There he is. There he is. So there's barbecue, is literally what he goes by. with his Legba Veve shirt on. There you have it. All right. Okay. Okay. Barbecue. His participation in a voodoo ritual, this is barbecue, to bring justice to moist, I don't know how it's pronounced, while threatening the stinking bourgeois, was this an American college student? And the Syriano-Libane, Syrian and Lebanese descendants. Okay, so I guess they don't like Syrians or the Lebanese there either. Okay. I don't even know what's going on with that. There's Syrian and Lebanese immigrants or descendants in Haiti. The world is a complex place. Puts on raw display Haitian essentialism and racism, in that the ritual ties so-called authentic power, the power Cherezier envisions for himself, to the traditions of Haiti's black majority. Wilson Joseph, aka Lanmo Sanju, currently remains on the FBI most wanted list. Let me show you. There he is, wanted by the FBI, Lanmo Sanju. Conspiracy to commit hostage taking and hostage taking. Yeah, looks like an upstanding individual. He's currently on the FBI most wanted list with a posted reward of $1 million. According to the FBI, Lanmo Sanju, as leader of the gang 400 Mawozo, allegedly participated in the October 2021 kidnapping of 17 Christian missionaries in Haiti, including 5 children, one as young as 8 months old. The hostages were allegedly held at gunpoint and most remained captive for 61 days. The gang demanded ransom payment for each of the victims. Lanmo Sanju was charged with conspiracy to commit hostage-taking and hostage-taking by an indictment filed on the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Okay. All right, here we have from Oxford University Press, 2008, The Central Liberal Truth, How Politics Can Change a Culture and Save It from Itself. And yeah, very well reviewed by authors, David Brooks of the New York Times, and former administrator, USAID, that's funny, etc. Thomas Friedman at the New York Times loves it. Okay, so a controversial look at how cultural values make some countries democratic and rich and others authoritarian and poor. Okay. No. So this is, I think, probably a bit more editorial, but let's take a look at it. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It is a theory based on culture, not race, in belief, not ability. It puts the blame for Haiti's plight squarely with the voodoo spirits that still hold dominant influence over the lives of the Haitians. It puts the blame for Haiti's plight squarely with the voodoo spirits that still hold dominant influence over the lives of the Haitians. The basic difference is that the Judeo-Christian tradition makes man responsible for his destiny. In contrast, the Haitian externalizes his guilt. He attributes everything, the good as well as the bad, to the spirits. Since this limits his responsibility, it also limits his potential. At its simplest, it means that if a Haitian steals a jug of milk from Dr. Hodge's hospital, he has no shame because he believes he was given the opportunity by the spirits. On a more complex level, it means that there is a limit to how organized the society can become, how advanced its agriculture can be. Voodoo is not a religion that concerns itself with ethical issues. This is true. The notions of sin and moral law, amoral law, are alien to Vodon. Its followers' destinies are believed to be controlled by hundreds of spirits, the Loa, very human and capricious, who must be propitiated through ceremonies if one is to realize one's desires. So this is referencing another author we've already mentioned. Voodoo is a species of the sorcery that Cameroonian economist Daniel Atunga Manguel identifies in Culture Matters as one of the principal obstacles to progress in Africa. A society in which magic and witchcraft flourish today is a sick society ruled by tension, fear, and moral disorder. Sorcery is a costly mechanism for managing conflict and preserving the status quo, which is importantly what African society is about. Voodoo discourages initiative, rationality, achievement, education, and a number of other factors that are discussed in the following chapter. What can explain Haiti's predicament is a set of cultural values, beliefs, and attitudes rooted in African culture and the slavery experience that resist progress. I don't fully agree with that because we really have to take a look at, U.S. dominance of the Western Hemisphere and corporations and stuff like that. So I'm going to show some leftist stripes on this one, but I think that's part of it, certainly. It's not the whole story. It's also the Clintons' fault. Okay. Okay, here's where it gets even worse. Even worse. Are you ready? Let's take a look at the chat. All right, you only need 2 more super chats for the palate cleanser. I'm gonna need some Charlie after this, maybe in another video. Zombies incoming. It was against France, not the United States. Yes, that's correct. No one, someone. So if I said United States, I was incorrect. It was a slave revolt against France. That doesn't matter for people now though, because they just see it as Western imperialism. But no, you're correct. Thank you. In the 1980s, panning gases. In the early 1980s, when punk culture was ending, many of my punk rock friends charismatically converted to Santeria. I'm still a bit baffled. Yeah, I think a lot of punk people and also a lot of hardcore people from the 80s just converted to a lot of different religions. A bunch of hardcore people converted to Orthodoxy, all kinds of stuff like that. I don't really have an issue with Santeria. I do have an issue with Paulo when it's, which is the dark side, but I have no bone to pick with Santeria. Yeah, Crunk Monkey says Reynolds Aluminum. Also, Dole Pineapple, I think, or I might be confusing that with another country. Plenty of, and also the Disney Corporation. Disney has a bunch of these kids' toys and clothing made in Haiti. Plenty of example of U.S. interference over the years, as well as a period of military occupation. So yeah, I'm not dismissing that at all. And I think the last author went a little bit too far. But whoa, you sound like Chomsky. Yeah, but no, that's a factor. Real zombies? Yep. MacD says Hamilton Morris did a great Vice documentary about a decade ago with Wade Davis. Oh, damn. Oddly enough, I saw Wade Davis speak once with RFK Jr., but it was like 20 years ago in New York. I also hung out with RFK Jr. briefly when I was a kid. I keep running into him. It's very strange. Serpent in the Rainbow film was very popular with my converted friends. To be fair, it was one of the only films about it at the time. I mean, it was a cool movie. I liked it. It's fancified. It's over the top. Yeah, it's a Wes Craven movie. Just Crunk Monkey says, just did an image search for baby Doc Duvalier. He died at 60, looking somewhat like a zombie, gaunt and fair-skinned. A far cry from his stout Bond henchman look. What did he die of? It sounds like some serious illness. Okay, this is Stockopolypse's schizo posting. All right, let's put him on timeout. All right. Okay, well that saved a lot of time. I don't even care what they're saying. Okay, yeah, it's a bot. Okay, whatever. I booted him. Okay, so let's scroll through that. Nico, thoughts on Jake Stratton Kent's work on the Grimorium Verum, specifically the section about ATR on the True Grimoire. I got into a punch-up with Jake Stratton Kent online once over Goetia, and he threatened to curse me. Spoiler alert, he lost. And that's all I'll say about that. All right. The last author went a little bit too far. It was racist AF. This is incredibly disappointing. No, I don't think so. I don't think that was racist. I think that was and again, he's quoting African economists. I don't believe that was racist. It is inconvenient for certain people's narratives, but no. Okay. Oh, and are you disappointed? Wonderful. I'm happy to disappoint it. You can go fuck yourself off out of the chat. Bye. Wait, who the fuck are you? Dapper Don Data. I don't even know. Like, who are you? I don't know who you are. You're disappointed? Great. Go watch something else. It's a whole internet, okay? It's a whole YouTube. I don't care. All right. Adolfo Constanzo. Oh, here's a very special individual. This guy. Some of you may know of him. He's fairly infamous. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, who lived from 1962 to 1989, was a Cuban-American serial killer, drug dealer, and cult leader who led an infamous drug trafficking and occult gang in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, and I'm sure somebody does know how that's pronounced, so I'm sorry if I did that, Mexico, that was dubbed the Narco-Satanists, Spanish Los Narcosatanicos, by the media. The cult was involved in multiple ritualistic killings in Matamoros, including the murder of Mark Kilroy, an American student abducted, tortured, and killed in the area in 1989. Adolfo Constanzo was born in Miami, Florida, to Delia Aurora Gonzalez, a Cuban immigrant, in 1962. Constanzo was baptized Catholic and served as an altar boy, but also accompanied his mother on trips to Haiti to learn about voodoo. As a teenager, he became apprenticed to a local sorcerer and began to practice a religion called Palo Mayombe, which involves animal sacrifice. As an adult, Constanzo moved to Mexico City and met the men who were to become his followers. They began to run a profitable business casting spells to bring good luck, which involved expensive ritual sacrifices of chickens, goats, snakes, zebras, and even lion cubs. Many of his clients were rich drug dealers and hitmen who enjoyed the violence of Constanzo's magical displays. Constanzo started to raid graveyards for human bones to put in his nganga, or cauldron. Before long, his cult decided that the spirits of the dead that resided in the nganga would be stronger, providing the cult more powerful protection with live human sacrifices instead of old bones. The resulting killings soon totaled more than 20 victims, whose mutilated bodies were found in and around Mexico City. This process escalated until Constanzo eventually decided that the gang needed the power of a brain from an American student, culminating with the 1989 murder of Mark Kilroy. This is real. Constanzo began to believe that his magic, much of which he took from Palo Mayombe, was responsible for the success of the cartels and demanded to become a full business partner with one of the most powerful families he knew, the Calzadas. When his demand was rejected, 7 family members disappeared. Their bodies turned up later with fingers, toes, ears, brains, and even, in one case, the spine missing. On March 13, 1989, Constanzo's henchmen abducted a pre-med student, Mark Kilroy, from outside a Mexican bar and took him back to the ranch. Kilroy was a U.S. citizen who had been in Mexico on spring break. When Kilroy was brought to the ranch, Constanzo murdered him. Police quickly discovered the cult and that Constanzo had been responsible for Kilroy's death. He sought a quote, good/superior brain for one of his ritual spells. Officers raided the ranch and discovered Constanzo's cauldron, which contained various items such as a dead black cat and a human brain. 15 mutilated corpses were dug up at the ranch, one of them Kilroy's. Officials said Kilroy was killed by Constanzo with a machete chop to the back of the neck. That was, by the way, after he was raped. Officials said immediately after he was bent over the cauldron. Officials said Kilroy was killed by Constanzo with a machete chop to the back of the neck when Kilroy tried to escape about 12 hours after being taken to the ranch. All right. So here's a example of this is a bit of an odd one, but this is a voodoo-influenced serial killer in the U.S., another serial killer. Bayou Justice, voodoo murder shook future ghost town. Authorities said today they are completely baffled in their search for the crazed killer who fatally shot a 41-year-old Mont's housewife and brutally mutilated the sex organs of her lifeless body. Leo Montz, 47, found his wife dead in their river-level home yesterday evening at 4:45 after working at a paint plant all day. He said he last saw his wife at 6 a.m. Montz found her body face down in a pool of blood, pillowed by her folded arms. The shotgun lay next to the body with the muzzle near her head. According to the lawmen, the slayer killed Mrs. Montz with a 12-gauge shotgun she used to kill rats. He said, "It looks like she was on the floor, on her knees, begging for her life when he fired." 15 minutes later, the sheriff said her attacker fired a second blast into her groin. Dr. Clayton said the killer placed the shotgun muzzle above Mrs. Montz's left shoulder and fired downward. The shot penetrated the heart and ripped the abdomen, killing her instantly. The suspect, Guidry revealed, is a Creole witch doctor. According to the deputy, among other clues not reported about the crime scene, a voodoo curse had been set up in the Montz home, laid out as a flask attached to a crude doll and suspended from the ceiling. The doll's head pointed downward, revealing a name scrawled on its back. That afternoon, the Associated Press confirmed Guidry's voodoo claim. Authorities now believe the murderer of Blanche Mance was a madman into voodoo. Voodoo, the witchcraft, this article's from the 50s, okay? Voodoo, the witchcraft of the slaves brought over from Africa, so I definitely would not have termed it that way, is known to be practiced in the Mance area, Coroner Earl Clayton now admits, reporting local Creole peoples make themselves up as voodoo doctors. Creoles are white descendants of early French and Spanish settlers. This is one thing I've gathered, by the way, from talking to people from the Caribbean, that ironically, a lot of the people who were the biggest voodoo practitioners were white slave owners who used it to terrorize the slaves and keep them in control. You don't hear that. You don't hear that, do you? Mrs. Mance, a 41-year-old childless housewife, was not a Creole. However, Mance is a perfect setting for the weird rites of voodoo. Dr. Clayton said Mrs. Mance did not believe in voodooism. However, he said, it is possible someone believed she was under a spell or that she had put a spell on them. A neighbor may have killed her to free her from the spell or to free himself or herself, he said. All right, now here's a better source. Anthropoetics. This is from UCLA. UCLA for first open access journal, the Journal of Generative Anthropology. The Forensics of Sacrifice, a symbolic analysis of ritualistic crime. Institute for the Research of Organized and Ritual Violence, LLC. Okay, well, let's take a look. Oh boy. Okay. Similarly, so in this section I get a bit into Paulo Mayombe, and I said at the beginning of the survey that while Paulo Mayombe is not voodoo, it is a fellow traveler, and a lot of people who are into voodoo are also into Paulo. And that was of course in the case, that was true in the case of the serial killer Constanzo that we talked about. All right. Similarly to voodoo and Santeria practitioners, Paleros, those are Paulo Mayombe practitioners, claim that they are being persecuted for their religious beliefs and stigmatized for their ritual practices. However, there is a significant difference. Regardless of whether the Paleros' intent is to heal or harm, Paulo Mayombe ritually requires the use of human bones. Hence, this practice always entails the theft of human remains. Additionally, the types of animals sacrificed for Paulo include domesticated pets such as dogs and other larger animals. The Nganga, that's the cauldron that they put rotting flesh into, is routinely fed, and that's used to do magic, is routinely fed with blood, so sacrifice occurs much more frequently than in Santeria rituals. Finally, the religion of Paulo Mayombe appeals to drug traffickers who believe that it has the power to protect them, and Paleros are hired to conduct special protection rituals. There are more crimes attributed to Paulo Mayombe than any of the other syncretic traditions. They frequently include grave robbing, extortion, and animal and human sacrifice. In communities with large populations of Santeria and voodoo practitioners, it is not unusual to find headless chickens on the doorways and steps of courthouses and government buildings, where practitioners discard the sacrificed bird as part of a spell that will protect them from being found guilty. Animal sacrifice in the worship of Paulo Mayombe surpasses basic problems for health departments and humane societies and has been associated with more serious crimes such as grave robbing, drug trafficking, and murder. Yeah, this is all over New York. Not only is the intention of the worshiper characteristically to cause harm, but the items required for particular spells can only be obtained illegally. Additionally, Paulo Mayombe animal sacrifice is much more disturbing because it entails the use of domesticated pets, such as dogs. Since Paulo Mayombe focuses its rituals on the spirits of the dead instead of the Paulo gods, rituals require human remains, specifically the human skull and other body parts. The central theology of Paulo is that the spirit of the person whose bones are placed in the Nganga, the sacred cauldron, carries out the owner's wishes. Animal sacrifice occurs because the Nganga must be initiated and continually fed blood. Although penalties for animal abuse and grave desecration vary from state to state, the more serious ritualistic crime is generally the theft of human remains. In Newark, New Jersey, several arrests were made in connection to Paulo Mayombe rituals. In October 2002, a father and son were arrested after a search of their home uncovered both animal and human remains. Dean Maglione, Essex County Assistant Prosecutor, stated, "They take the head and they put it in a cauldron. And after they put it in a cauldron, they put some other ingredients in there and they sell services. They sell ceremonies. People pay to sit in a room with a cauldron." In one news article, the reporter specifically recognized the crime scene as a temple. A raid on the basement temple of a religious sect uncovered human body parts allegedly stolen from cemeteries and the remains of several animals that may have been sacrificed by worshippers. The human remains, including 3 skulls, were found Monday in cauldrons set up on altars in a building owned by Eddie Figueroa, 56, who authorities believe is a high priest in the Palomayambe sect. It was the second time in 2 months that Newark authorities have recovered stolen body parts from worshippers of the sect, whose priests use human remains in their rituals. The raid grew out of an investigation that began in July when some remains were stolen from a crypt at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Newark. In March 2003, another arrest was made. 60-year-old Miriam Mirabel was charged with leading the Palo cult and ordering her followers to steal bodies from local cemeteries. All right. We got a few more in this section. Cop of the occult. You know, it's hilarious when the world conforms to my worldview. It's just like, I just want to be left alone by magic sometimes. But oh no, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Magic is a part of the human experience all over the world, for good or bad. All right. Cop of the Occult, Associated Press, 1988. Godoy, 37, became the department specialist in... So we're talking about Ritualistic, a cop that investigates ritualistic crimes in Miami. Whose name is... Yeah, Godoy, Amy Godoy, the occult cop. What an interesting individual. A Miami-Dade, Florida county detective who walks a beat on the dark side, investigating ritual crimes. It was way before X-Files. Godoy, 37, became the department's specialist in ritualistic crimes in 1988. Born in Cuba, her family moved to Spain shortly after Fidel Castro took power. They migrated to the United States when she was 8. 3 years ago, Godoy went undercover for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. At the Miami home of Jose Torregatart, she discovered numerous rare animals, some dead and others ready to be sacrificed in the name of Palomayambe. We confiscated human skulls. He had a femur he could not account for, Godoy said. He had 4 baby owls in captivity and all kinds of birds frozen, blue jays and cardinals. And the worst part was a baby panther, which he had frozen in the refrigerator. Torregatart, a high priest or palero, was taken into custody for violating the Migratory Bird and Endangered Species Acts and is currently under house arrest. Grave desecration is a big-time criminal activity, not to mention immoral, Godoy said. A group of people nailed the tongue to the tree and sacrificed animals and left them there. All this was so they could ask permission to take the head. Under the religion's tenets, a dead person must give permission for a palero to use his skull for magic. An elaborate ceremony is performed to ask the dead for the ultimate sacrifice. Once the head is procured, it goes into a cauldron with other materials such as knives, guns, and animal bones, and the palero asks the spirit to do a deed for the living. It could intercede in a romantic triangle, or perhaps ensure that a curse works. All right, then the last in this section. Investigating crimes involving the narco culture. Tritech Forensics as an ex-cop. The violence and... So I wouldn't necessarily call this the most authoritative source, but I thought this guy's an ex-cop, so I thought what he had to say was interesting. This is not some kind of peer-reviewed thing. But he says, the violence and drug trafficking spread by Latin American drug cartels and criminal street gangs is spreading. Narco-terrorist acts involving ritualistic murder and targeted assassinations are growing throughout the U.S. and Mexico. Many of these groups are utilizing various religious ideologies and customs to seek protection. 1 second. From rival organizations and police. Mexican drug cartels such as La Familia Michoacana and Los Caballeros Templarios commit acts of drug smuggling, assault, and murder in the name of religion. Similar patterns are developing among international human smuggling and trafficking rings, where West African Vodou is being used to exercise control over victims and members of those organizations. So I include this because he talks about the cartel violence, specifically because he talks about the cartel violence intersecting the Nigerian trafficking rings or the African trafficking rings. I want to find better corroboration for this, though. All right. Now here's where we get to the lovely occult community, where people are ever so intelligent. Of course, everyone everyone on this stream who follows me is very intelligent, but some of these people are missing a few brain cells when they defend this stuff. Okay, so some of you may know that one of the most infamous occult books in the West is the Vodou Gnostic Workbook by this douchebag named Michael Bertio. That was like this super sought after thing forever because no one could find it before the internet, and Kenneth Grant hyped it up one time, and it was just like, it's like the most like over the top schizo insanity ever. Let's talk about Bertio. These are my words at first. The author and voodoo practitioner Michael Bertio, who is white, has long been considered the preeminent writer on voodoo in the occult community. Particularly, okay, so before we start this, I want to say, so this is everything, if you want to talk about the energy of the system, this is all the energetic weight behind this system and the karmic weight behind it. It's the karma of slavery before it enters the occult community, which is largely a bunch of autistic furries. You know what I mean? So, no offense. Here we go. But people, let's put it this way, very spoiled Westerners who are completely ill-equipped to deal with this, and who just go back to the undergraduate playbook of you're racist if you criticize it. The author and voodoo practitioner Michael Bertio, who is white, has long been considered the preeminent writer on voodoo in the occult community, particularly after his work was promoted by other more prominent authors like Kenneth Grant and Grant Morrison. While practitioners of voodoo occasionally claim that Bertio's eccentric writing on voodoo does not represent the living tradition, he was indeed initiated into Haitian voodoo in Haiti in 1964. Furthermore, Bertio was employed as a social worker in the Chicago Haitian community for 4 decades, where he may well have had easy access to children and other vulnerable people. Here, one of his prior students recounts Bertio's pattern of severely sexually abusing his pupils. Okay, so this is from a guy named Frater Barabbas, who's a old school pagan, I think from the 70s, who talks about remembering Michael Bertio. Here's what Frater Barabbas says about going to see Bertio in the 80s. I will satisfy the curiosity of my readers. This whole article is worth reading, by the way. I will satisfy the curiosity of my readers and briefly relate it. As an object lesson, it says everything that anyone needs to know about Michael Bertio. I found him to be cruel, manipulative, ruthless, and completely without any human compassion whatsoever. This is not the kind of person that you could trust, believe in, nor would you place yourself into his hands for any reason. I would rather offer my head to the gaping jaws of a crocodile than give myself into the hands of this man. At first, only 2 members of our extended coven periodically went down to Chicago to work with Michael. Those 2 members were Christopher and a senior member named John, yet after the first trip, only Christopher went down to see Bertio. It seemed that John's first experience was too traumatic to be repeated. I thought this strange, but John regaled us with his frightful experiences with Bertio. It would seem that Michael used a form of sexual terrorism to get his students into the right frame of mind for his various occult and magical operations. He would select an approach that was guaranteed to frighten and unbalance his subject, acting as either a homosexual or a heterosexual lover as it suited him. His unwanted advances would be rationalized as being the only manner that such occult knowledge and initiatory mysteries could be communicated. It was an excuse to sexually abuse and exploit individuals who came seeking knowledge and special teachings, and Bertio had no problem obliging those foolish enough to accede to his desires. My initiation consisted of first being completely naked, presented to the various spirits and loa of the dead, then being forced to drink 1/3 of a bottle of wild turkey, and finally being sexually accosted by this man. I remember distinctly lying naked on the floor of his temple with this rather flabby, furry man laying on top of me, pinning me down while attempting to French kiss me as I gritted my teeth and thereby arouse me. Poor souls were attracted to Michael, all of them somehow hoping to gain some of this knowledge. He took from them whatever he could get, mostly in the way of sexual favors, psychic access, and various forms of vicious manipulation. All right. Well, if that wasn't enough, let's hear Berdio in his own words describing essentially this exact scenario in the Voodoo Gnostic workbook. And I included page numbers if anyone wants to go look. So these are my introduction. Michael Berdio himself includes in his Vodon Gnostic workbook a long passage in which the reader is meant to imagine themselves going to Berdio's apartment to be raped and murdered. In Berdio's words, "While you were bathing, I decided to join you, and making another drink for each of us, came to the bathroom. It was there that I noticed the particular suitability of your body for the deeper aspects of my research." Okay, you know what? I'm not going to read this online because I'll just read the highlights. You can go, it's him talking about wanting to grape and murder his students. I'm not going to read that, but I'll point out, you can go read it at the page, which is endvoodootrafficking.org. But here's some highlights. "I really wanted to strangle you. I really wanted to squeeze the breath of life from you. I wanted to grab your throat and press it inwardly to its limits. And then your instinct could read my mind, and you realized that I was trying to harm you. There you go. Your nakedness beneath the hairs of my body began a vain struggle. I really wanted you to struggle. I wanted to show you that there wasn't any escape from what was to happen." Okay, so this is literally the exact thing that Frater Barabbas is describing. I remember lying naked on the floor of his temple with this rather flabby, furry man laying on top of me, pinning me down, attempting to French kiss me. So he's a grapist. He's a grapist. So, and I comment finally, as seen above, this is far more than a fantasy for Berdio, now nearly 90, who is still widely revered by the, quote, occult community. All right. And now, quite ironically, for all the times these people have accused me of being somehow racist for pointing out this horrific track record of terror, mutilation, sexual assault, slavery, etc., let's point this out. Kanaz Falan is the pen name. This is this blog article, which for some reason he's left up. So this is about a white voodoo practitioner who became a Nazi. Okay, and they call me, they say this shit about me, and then it's them. It's them, the irony. Kanaz Falan is a pen name of another of the most prominent authors on voodoo in America. He very publicly became a neo-Nazi in 2016, saying, "Why would an initiate in Haitian voodoo support folkish heathens?" Okay, I'm not going to read this either because it's super racist, and he's talking about loving the Daily Stormer, and he's talking about anti-Semitic memes and white genocide and all this crazy stuff. And so I found my political views drifting toward the alternative right. Okay. So there you have it. That's horrible. All right. So, and then finally, and this is somewhat on a personal note, I'll say on a final note, which I've saved for the end as it enters the realm of the purely subjective. In 2007, I was accused of being racist and mentally ill. They're still doing that. Just the gaslighting. Every time I bring this up, I'm just racist, I'm mentally ill. Okay, great. I need help. Okay, great. For mischaracterized statements about the Loa being insectile. So back in 2007, I pointed out these people describing the Loa as insects, and then they turned that into I'm insane and I have mental illness. But as I point out here, this description comes not from me, but directly from Michael Berdio, one of the most popular writers on voodoo in the world, a detail that my critics were absolutely well aware of. As mentioned above, spurious claims that Berdio somehow represents a break from the voodoo tradition are contraindicated by his actual initiations in Haiti and his ongoing connections to Haitian voodoo. Here are just some of the many examples from his Voodoo Gnostic workbook, which infamously dwells on insectile and arachnid analogies. For example, there is a particular point of contact named after the Loas of the Gede family. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's just schizophrenia, but he's talking about spider Loa, were-zombies, and zombie Loa. You now become a truly magical spider, a were-spider who will appear to sit in the midst of your web. So now you're a spider magian, spider sorcerer, and were-tarantula priesthood. Okay, take your meds, please. The shaman may be possessed by both anthropomorphic and theomorphic spirits, appearing as men, animals, insects, or their fantastic being. The Transvection family work almost entirely insect forms. The spirit is the were-insect Loa Mystère. Mystery of cockroaches. These magical beings are to be imagined as exotic insects or animals. was crawling with the insect-like mutants of a phobetic merger of oracles. Just take your meds. The very strange Saucerian UFO inhabitants often resemble insects and other forms of animals. Oh, so note that Bertio is also fixated on the work of Wilhelm Reich. And we've just discussed Reich on this channel, haven't we? Insect-like myriads, insect-like elemental domains. It's just the sensations of insect bites and an almost never-ending sequence of poisonous stings. Yeah. So, yeah, but I pointed this out and then all of a sudden I'm the crazy one. No. That's your leader, guys. That's your leader saying that stuff. All right, as seen above, I say the Loa as insects metaphor is not mine, but that of Michael Bertio. Indeed, his prominent student David Beth, who is also white, in addition to Kanaz Falon and Michael Bertio, and all the people who attacked me. All white. All of them. And many of them British, for that matter. Has continued to publish books perpetuating the image. Though he is of German descent, Beth was born in Angola and raised in Nigeria, from which his interest in voodoo stems, an interest he continued to pursue by undertaking voodoo research and initiation throughout Benin, Togo, Kenya, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Congo, and throughout Africa, before becoming a devoted student of Bertio. Yes, the usual no true Scotsman claims made by voodoo apologists that Bertio's system therefore does not represent the real voodoo are therefore deeply undercut by David Beth's own work, and this in addition to Bertio's own Haitian initiations. Indeed, as seen above, it seems that the abuses and violations of even Bertio's system pale in comparison with the, quote, real voodoo practiced by trafficking networks in West Africa and beyond. Here he continues the insect metaphor. So again, it's the insect schizophrenia. Were spiders in zombie Loa. Here's the remaining were insect spirits. Visualize yourself as a were spider. Anyways, in conclusion, if repeating such imagery in order to critique it is racist, then the individuals claiming racism should raise their grievances with their own white leaders, as they are the ones who created it. To repeat, in conclusion, if repeating such imagery in order to critique it is racist, then the individuals claiming racism should raise their grievances with their own white leaders, as they are the ones who created it. And finally, conclusion and recommendations for action. This is me. While no religion can be deemed all bad or all good in absolute terms, it is crucial to address and call out the significant issues within voodoo. The religion's complex history and syncretism have led to a variety of practices, some of which are deeply entwined with human trafficking, exploitation, and psychological manipulation. These practices, often rooted in fear and superstition, have been leveraged by traffickers to control and exploit vulnerable individuals, particularly women and children. It is essential to acknowledge these abuses and work towards dismantling the structures that allow them to persist, while also recognizing that such problems are not unique to voodoo, but are present in many religious and cultural contexts. Calling out these issues is not an attack on the religion itself, but a necessary step in protecting human rights and preventing further exploitation. So let me repeat this for the people in the back. I don't mean people in comments, but other than the ones I've already banned. Calling out these issues is not an attack on the religion itself, but a necessary step in protecting human rights and preventing further exploitation. All right. And here's a bit of my own editorializing, finally, after I present all this evidence. The global spiritual community has often been hesitant to expose crimes within its ranks due to the lingering trauma of the false accusations during the satanic panic of the 1980s. More recently, the resurgence of similar patterns by American QAnon conspiracy theorists has compounded this reluctance. QAnon and related online conspiracy groups, often driven by the American evangelical right, have weaponized social media to spread unfounded allegations rapidly. While it is essential to resist these harmful social movements, it is equally important to acknowledge that abuse, exploitation, and trafficking do occur globally, and alternative spiritual groups are not immune to these issues. Alternative spiritual groups are not immune to these issues. Given the volatile political climate fostered by groups like QAnon, religio-magical lay practitioners must be exceedingly vigilant about abuses within their own communities. It is imperative to collaborate with law enforcement to identify and address these issues proactively. Such vigilance will not only help protect vulnerable individuals, but also enhance the credibility and safety of the global spiritual community. Such vigilance will not only help protect vulnerable individuals, but will also enhance the credibility and safety of the global spiritual community. By actively policing their own ranks and ensuring the safety and well-being of their members, alternative spiritual groups can create safer and more welcoming spaces. This proactive stance will demonstrate to the broader public that these communities are committed to upholding safe and healthy environments, which is crucial for their social integration and acceptance. Failure to address these issues will only lead to further marginalization, hindering the progress that many alternative religious communities strive to achieve. Okay, what can I do? What can I do? And I've put links in this video. Number 1, raise awareness. Actively spread awareness of voodoo-based trafficking networks within spiritual communities to expose hidden abuses. Break the taboo around criticizing voodoo to dismantle the climate of fear and silence that many practitioners use as cover for their activities. 2, monitor and partner. Continuously monitor spiritual communities for evidence of human trafficking, whether voodoo-based or otherwise, and proactively collaborate with law enforcement to address these issues, and I'm happy to do that. 3, collaborate with agencies. Engage with governmental and non-governmental agencies in Europe and Africa that combat human trafficking, including voodoo-based trafficking in West Africa. Authorities should consider working directly with these groups to gather information and dismantle trafficking networks. Individuals are encouraged to evaluate these organizations and offer partnerships or support for their initiatives where appropriate. So many of these in fact, almost all of these we've already included literature from. So UNODC, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, has specific programs addressing human trafficking in West Africa, including the use of voodoo rituals. They collaborate with NAPTIP, a prominent Nigerian anti-trafficking agency. Nigerian National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP. This Nigerian government agency combats human trafficking, frequently dealing with cases involving voodoo rituals. La Strada International. This NGO addresses human trafficking in Europe and has reported on the use of voodoo in trafficking Nigerian women. Watclef, Women Trafficking and Child Labor Eradication Foundation. Based in Nigeria, another one bit from Nigeria, Watclef focuses on combating human trafficking and child labor, including cases involving voodoo rituals. ANPCAN, the African Network for the Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect, addresses child trafficking and abuse in Africa, including practices rooted in traditional beliefs like voodoo. And then ETAHT, Edo State Task Force Against Human Trafficking, located in Nigeria's Edo State, a region heavily affected by voodoo-related trafficking. ETAHT works directly with victims. Finally, if you have read and been affected by this survey, please strongly consider making a donation to the Polaris Project, which is linked in this video below, one of the leading organizations combating human trafficking worldwide. I have partnered with Polaris and offered financial support since 2019 and can recommend them wholeheartedly as one of the best vetted anti-trafficking charities in the world. Love me. Okay. There we have it. There we have it. Oh, man. Okay, well, we've been on for like 3 hours or more. Okay, let's look at the comments. Nico says, I appreciate the tea and the honesty. Dapper Don Dada, aka Legba, says, you spoke my name aloud, zombie. Okay, so you're real mentally healthy. You're gonna get booted. Retarded. Oh, slightly off topic. I just saw something on news. The FBI estimates 450 truck drivers are serial unalivers. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's really scary. I don't doubt it. Okay. Richard Stanley's The White Darkness, 2002. Stanley interviews real followers of the voodoo faith and lets them do the explanations on what their religion is and what isn't. It's worth a watch. Filmed during 2004, during the Haitian coup d'etat. Okay. Interesting. Nick says, what a nightmare. Yeah. All right. Dapper, whatever the fuck your name is. Bye. Bye. SB says, is all animal sacrifice nonsense, or is there any reasonable use of it? Well, I will say this. I don't actually have a problem with animal... Okay. I don't have a problem with immigrant communities that... Well, let me just point this out. It's not as bad as factory farming. Okay. It's not nearly as bad as factory farming, and we'll leave it at that. But in terms of magical use, no. Not in any good way that you want. There's a brutal Muslim ritual where animals are sacrificed, Eid Barak or something. Okay. Damn, this is a rabbit hole through hell, says Queen Homunculus. Yeah, that's a hell of a way to raise energy. Yeah. Harvey Harris says this sounds ASF, so schizophrenic ASF. Yeah. Desert dwellers. That's pretty good. You had me going for a second there. Bashing the were spider visualization technique. Wow, I'm so disappointed. I expected so much more from you, Jason. Well, yeah, that's about the shape of it. Queen Homunculus says Q stuff, all they did was raise awareness of the human trafficking from what I remember. That part was good. People should be aware that there are human trafficking networks, and they do intersect with government. Look at Jeffrey Epstein, look at Jimmy Savile in England, look at Prince Andrew. They also just added a bunch of gibberish to it, and all this stuff about adrenochrome, and they overdid it. So it's like the 9/11 thing. It's like, yeah, it becomes, at a certain point, it almost becomes like deliberate disinformation or misinformation to throw people off the trail. Queen says this type of problem impacts all spiritual communities. Yeah, religious and spiritual orgs are places these traffickers like to infiltrate. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because think about it. It's the same as the Catholic Church, right? It's like religion and spirituality have the ability to terrorize people with symbols and make them believe things that aren't true if they're used unscrupulously. And also, they unfortunately can be a good way to get access to vulnerable people. And so that's why I find it so imperative to hold the line on it. And I don't care what people say about me. And if they try to like spread a bunch of shit about me or come attack me, now you know why, right? They got into flat earth, yeah, QAnon. It's just like at some point you have to say like maybe this is even deliberate misinformation. It's almost like they're covering for trafficking networks or PDF file networks, which are very real and are all over the world and intersect all different levels of society. It could be people who live next to you, in addition to people in government, police, everything. It's actually very, very frightening. But for that reason, when we're looking at these that's why everything I've shown you has been vetted, peer-reviewed. Journalists, like actual material, right? That's why it's so critical to me that everything has to be on point. Because if I'm just quoting, like, yeah, there are some, so towards the end, we got some subjective stuff. We got some firsthand anecdotal stuff like Fraud or Barabbas. Okay, so take that for what you will. Although that dude's own writing backs it up, right? So, but it's important not to become, overexcitable on these topics, shall we say, because just the facts are bad enough. Don't embellish. Okay, well, man. Well, that's it for today, unless we get 2 more super chats. I guess I don't have to do a top occult movies video. But tell you what, I'm just gonna go get another drink and then get some water. And if you have more questions or you want to throw in those last 2 super chats, I'll take a few more questions and then I'm gonna get off. Oh no, I had feta cheese on my nose. It's disgusting. Sorry. Queen Homunculus says, this was interesting and necessary too. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. People have been gaslighting me and saying I'm the problem for pointing this stuff out for almost 30 years. Wait, 2007? Maybe not 30 years. Let's see. It's actually 18 years. 17, 18 years. Feels like 30 years. By the way, I could tell you all kinds of stories from my life and friends' lives about voodoo, right? I could tell you all kinds of horror stories, but it's hearsay, it's anecdotal evidence, so I don't, because it's neither here nor there. I wanted to only show you vetted stuff, so you're seeing that I'm not just like pulling stuff out of my ass, so you can't just say I'm making it up. Again, if you're gonna attack me, you also gotta attack Europol, the UN, the U.S. Senate. Nix, thank you so much. 20 Australian dollars. I appreciate that so much. Thanks for holding the line, Jason. Takes real backbone to do this. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I've actually suffered quite a bit for this issue in my life, because at one point I was unemployable for a long period of time because these assholes put up all these, these assholes spread all these rumors about me, so they're serious. They really want to protect their little hive of villainy, their hive of wretched scum and villainy. Oh, okay. Well, I think I got, I think I got 10 super chats. Just for some reason it doesn't log them, which I don't understand. Maybe it's if they're not US, it doesn't log them, which is really dumb. So we'll say that we got another. We got all 10, but I ain't doing it now because I've just been talking for 4 hours, something like that. All right, everyone. Lots of love. Dominic says, how prevalent was voodoo in the antebellum South? Also, thanks for the stream. Scary and informative. So I live in the South now, and I have family in New Orleans, and I love New Orleans. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should just sue some of these people. But how prevalent was it in the South? I actually don't know. And I think that my impression of New Orleans voodoo is it's much more touristy, although real stuff does happen out in the bayou. I think that it was actually very hard. Interestingly enough, I wanted to have a whole section about America, but most of the stuff I found in America was like Paulo or serial, like more on the Paulo side, and I read that stuff. I actually couldn't find a whole lot of information about negative voodoo stuff in the U.S. So maybe that's encouraging, or maybe it's just not something that people are aware of. I would highly doubt that these trafficking networks don't still bring people to the U.S. And ironically, New Orleans, just as it was before, New Orleans was the port for slaves, one of the ports for slaves, including from Haiti into the U.S. Ironically, it's still a major human trafficking hub because it's still a port. And human traffickers still bring slaves through New Orleans, and it's pretty lawless there. So this is one of these things like, for instance, I'm not the only one to point out, although once you see it, you can't unsee it. The idea that slavery ended in the U.S. Okay, how do you figure that slavery has ended in the U.S. when A, we have such a huge percentage of the black male population in jail, in which they basically are doing slavery or indentured servitude for the government and sometimes corporations, like making license plates and so on and so forth. How is that different? And many of them for nonviolent drug offenses. That's evil. That's evil. That needs to end. That needs to end. Absolutely. I'm not... it's like this. When people talk about structural racism, yeah, it exists for sure. When people play language games, that gets a bit silly. But you see when you look at the real world, yeah, there is obviously structural racism. That means taking people's freedom away. Okay, not these rich liberal language games. It's like the real thing. Okay, but also human trafficking is everywhere in the U.S. It could be literally, I'm sure, and Europe, I'm sure you see signs even when you're out of the supermarket. Like if you see something about human trafficking, say something. It's because people are trafficked everywhere. I'm in Texas. Texas is another hub for human trafficking because people come across the border. It's really bad. So I don't know. If anyone has any information on voodoo in the U.S., I'd like to see it. I could include stuff. And again, if stuff is unverifiable or I'm making a logical leap in it, I don't include it. So for instance, Maya Deren, who's a very famous filmmaker who made movies about voodoo and was in a voodoo initiate in Haiti in the 50s. She was white from the US. And she made the film, very great director. She made the film Meshes of the Afternoon and several other ones. She was a tweaker. She became a meth head and then died trying to lift up and throw a fridge. And I greatly suspect that voodoo had something to do with that, because that's the type of thing that voodoo people do. But obviously that's neither here nor there. I can't say, I can mention that, but this is hearsay. It's like, it's my own conjecture. So I can mention it, but we're not going to admit it as evidence for the court, right? So it's kind of the same with stuff like that in the South. I was looking at, there was a very famous serial killer in New Orleans named Madame Lalaurie, who was an awful, awful, awful white serial killer who tortured slaves. It's really dark. If you look it up, I've been to the house, and man, I've never felt, I almost got a migraine immediately. It's some of the nastiest energy. And then we got into a fight with somebody on the street right then. It's been, many people have said that she was also a voodoo practitioner and was using it to keep people in line. But then when I looked into it, that kind of fell apart. It looks like that was made up by later writers about it, or maybe even tourism people. So that I threw out. You know, I only included stuff that I could vet, and there's lots of stuff that I couldn't vet, so I left it out. But if you know of anything, I'm all ears. And in terms of the antebellum South, I have no idea. That's definitely an interesting master's thesis for someone to do. Yeah, Queen Homunculus, it's over $1 billion a year industry. I heard it's probably a lot more than that. Because, like, think about this. Human traffickers, like, how do you know? What are they writing down? Are they, like, reporting to taxes what they're doing? No. This is all this is just guesswork. We don't know. It's like when people say Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. It's like, on paper. How about Putin, who owns, like, practically all of the oil in Russia? You know, it's like, yeah. So, richest on paper. We can only track so much. Okay. So that's that. Thank you, everyone, for super chats. We're going to have tiered membership starting hopefully within the next 24 hours. So everyone, please consider becoming a subscriber and a sponsor of the channel. That will allow me to continue doing these, because as you can imagine, YouTube shies away from monetizing some of these videos. And I don't blame them, because they're trying to run a family-friendly thing, and this stuff is pretty horrific. But I got to make this work financially if I'm going to be doing hours and hours of it every week. So also, don't forget magic.me, and we have a new class starting on Monday. And most importantly, sorry, because I'm not turning this into an ad, obviously, but most importantly, if you've been affected by this, please take a look at the organizations linked that actively combat this. And thank God there are organizations that actively combat this. So ironically, while this is not talked about in the US, it is talked about in Africa, and it is talked about in Europe. And it's about time for people here to at least become aware of it. Just become aware of it and tell people about it. All right, that's going to be it so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who said thank you. You're welcome, and thank you. Love you guys and gals. Thank you for another great stream. I actually really enjoy doing these, and all the positive comments you send are greatly, greatly appreciated, particularly after years of getting this type of shit from people. All right. Lots of love, everyone.